Hey, Screamers. A quick note before we get to the episode. We would like to invite you to a live recording of our official 50th episode on May 22nd at 7 p.m. The event will be held here in Fort Worth at the Wine House, 1628 Park Place Avenue. The bar will be open, so come early and hang out before the show. Hope to see you all there. So, I did you want to say anything about Mr. Seinfeld's comments about the movie industry?
I didn't read them. So
you didn't see that?
So please enlighten me on what...
So, Seinfeld was basically like, look, the movie industry doesn't occupy the space it once did in the hierarchy of media. And like, it's over, was kind of his...
Well, look, if you want to argue that all media is over, then fine. I'll lay that out.
Right.
Well, that only the highest of the upper echelons actually get attention, and then that's always been the case anyway. Mostly because it's been a fucking rigged game to start with, right?
Right.
So if he wants to say that,
here's exactly. So this was in an interview in GQ. He said the movie business is over. The actual quote, he says, the movies no longer occupy the pinnacle they once did in the hierarchy of media. So he says what took its place is disorientation, confusion. And then he goes on to say that like this is why people are flocking to stand up.
Are they?
Okay, that's what I asked too. I'm like, okay, but he says that stand up they can trust. Everything else is fake.
Okay, so
which I don't understand that either. But
well, one, is it? Because if you look at, like you've been a purveyor of truth your entire career, Seinfeld. Way to go. I mean, like your airplane food jokes and your observational humor has just been at the cutting edge and really been telling truth to power, huh, Jerry? Whatever, man.
I know.
Like, and so like. There's such a fucking level of mediocrity in stand-up that's popular anyway. Like, so who's he pointing to? Jeff Dunham? Sebastian Maniscalco? Like, fuck you. Like, these fucking generic, just jackasses who can tell fucking dad jokes and bullshit. Like, and even, like, your highest level of, like, Kevin Hart's, all that shit's just fucking conversation. It's not fucking stand-up. Like your best stand-up got caught jerking off.
Yeah,
and that was and didn't get caught. He just fucking jerked off.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say.
And then your other ones who were truly at the apex decided to go on fucking anti-trans rants that they couldn't get out of their own fucking and they've completely lost the thread on who they were and what they meant to people. Mm-hmm. And to this idea of like, well, now I'm going to double down because I had my toe stepped on and my hand slapped a little bit on like you could have just fucking ignored it. But now you punch down and endanger people because you have some sort of indignation of like someone having backlash against your joke. Fuck you. Like, so
I knew this would wind you up.
This idea that yes, there are great stand-ups out there. There are people that are doing great work, but people aren't flocking to them, and they never fucking have. They never have. This is not like Bill Hicks was like selling out arenas. And look, I have nothing against Nate Bargatze or the people that are like truly kind of I mean, like I do like Sebastian Maniscalco. You can fuck right off. I mean, like that to me, that's just bullshit. It's George Lopez. It's fucking, and I don't mean to like lump Latin comedians in together. But it is that kind of base level. I'm going to, CBS at 7 p.m. Yeah. I'm going to, that kind of nonsense comedian that just kind of speaks generically to everybody. And I like Gaffigan. These guys that are kind of high up, that are kind of family friendly, I think they bring something to the table, but I don't believe that, look, people aren't, this idea that people are going out and seeking out, Sam Jay or Hannah Gadsby or even like Taylor Tomlinson, who is kind of got a resurgence. I mean, like a resurgence. I mean, she's seeing an uptick in her career, but I don't even know, like, really who are people seeking out?
Right, right.
What are the names he's saying?
Right.
Because it's not.
Gervais. He
He
didn't say anybody's name.
It's not CK. It's not Rock.
No, he wasn't. He didn't list any names. It was just stand up in general.
Right. And so, like, the biggest name going right now that has a little bit of a twinge on him, but is probably the funniest guy from at the highest level to me is Mulaney. Mm-hmm. And like, and so, but again, is that who people are flocking to?
And flocking to, I mean, does flocking just mean like Netflix specials?
Right, because they're just looking for fucking content and they've got money to spend.
Right, because that's where it seems like, and I mean, you're more invested in stand-up than I am, but it seems to me like that's where the stand-up is in these Netflix specials. And that's kind of the goal now. And that is different to me.
To fucking anybody.
Right. But that's different than saying like, oh, you know, we're playing at, where do the Mavs play here?
Yeah, the AAC.
Okay, right? I mean, oh yeah, we're going to go see that.
15,000 stadium.
Where everything is now like televised. Well, look, they have to fill those seats. Right. I mean, so, and I don't mean to like, insinuate that there are like plants in the audience, but at the same time,
well, like, I mean, yeah, you can give away tickets.
That's what I mean, right? Yeah. Oh, let's go do this thing.
And even like the indie comics, like, I mean, if you consider these guys still indie comics, like the Comedy Bang Bang guys, the Paul F. Tompkins, the Brian Posehn's, the Maria Bamfords. You're going to tell me that those guys are getting fucking $15 million deals at net? No, they're not.
No, they're not. No, right.
And those are the guys that are at the precipice of actual good comedy. So, like, one, I had this real problem with like Seinfeld ever being this. Look, he was wildly successful. He was wildly lucky. And he also had Larry David behind him.
Right.
And so, look, I'm not going to sit here and bash Seinfeld's comedy, right? Look, he is perfectly fine. But had he not tapped into Seinfeld and had Seinfeld not been renewed for a second season where it can really find its footing, he would be nobody.
When it wouldn't have got renewed now.
Right.
I mean, it would have been a Netflix show that they would have canceled just because, I mean,
right.
like so many of these decent, like actually decent shows on Netflix that I'm not going to be able to pull off the top of my head now. They're like, but they just don't get a second season because. And then the shitty ones that do.
He was part of a cultural zeitgeist. They hit at the exact right moment and utilized that kind of, like, look, I will say this about Seinfeld is that of the observational, clean humor, like sitcom-y people, he was the best of the best.
Yeah.
Like but like if you go back and watch Seinfeld, the things that don't hold up are his. Now, part of it is that's on purpose, right? The bits weren't ever supposed to be funnier than his stand-up bits weren't ever supposed to be funnier than the actual show itself. But even if you watched his specials, there were moments. But again, you're not gonna. And like then he goes off and like tries to do that whole "I'm telling you for the last time" tour. And whatever. Then he gets butthurt because the college kids don't laugh at him. And I'm just like, you know what? I mean, like, and then blames it all on them being woke or too liberal or you know, and that no one can take a joke anymore. That's not the fucking point, man. You're not fucking 25.
I mean, that is just like a straw man argument anyway, right? It's deflection. It's like, well, it's you, it's not me.
I mean, just hang it up. Yeah. Like if you can't like.
Well, look, he's making a movie about Pop-Tarts. Right. And I mean, like, who doesn't love a good Pop-Tart?
You know, it's a weird statement to make. And look, I don't necessarily disagree, but I think cinema is absolutely dying. And I think that it has not hit its death throes yet. But I do feel like I think the industry, you're going to have less and less creatives in the industry because they're already this whole thing with AI. And we talk about it with Last Night at the Devil, and there was posters in Civil War, and it's just creeping. It's creeping, and it's gonna fucking take over. It's going to, as soon as it gets good enough where we can't fucking notice, it's just gonna happen. And I think you're gonna push out people, and it's just gonna become homogenized bullshit. Right. And at that point, you won't need theaters, and you'll just create content because you can create content that'll be personalized for 800 million different assholes.
Well, and that's what everything is turning into now. I mean, it's like content and like, how do we create content? And I know that like, I mean, we're sitting here doing this. I don't think we think about it this way, about like, oh, this is good content or whatever, because like we do no preparation. I'm kidding. We do. But I mean, I think there is a different sort of perception or mindset. And this is where this idea of like cinema dying, it's like, I get it, but I hate that language. Like, why can't we talk about how, okay, this is a time to sort of reconsider and reshape and redesign, right? But we're not. We're like, we have to hang on to this, right? Like model.
Well, that's true too.
Right? We can't let go of this. It people, when power gets taken away from people, they hang on to dear life, right? And I mean, look at white men. Look at these like crazy Republicans right now. Look again. I know this isn't a political podcast, but deal with it. You should get my political slant by now. I mean, it's the same idea of like, I just have to do the craziest thing because I'm losing power and I don't want to.
Right.
But we're not going to talk about like, oh, here, let's redesign, let's shift, let's think about a way. Right, maybe it's not these big multiplex theaters anymore, right? But we're not even trying to do anything else.
Well, they don't know how to. It's the same thing. It's just these monoliths that exist, and they become so large that then at a certain point they can't turn back, right? Right. And so now you're stuck, right? You're stuck with 30 screens in a fucking huge ass building, and you don't know what to fill it with, right?
Right.
And so it's Look, I hope that I am wrong, and I hope that and I think this has been a really bizarre uptick of a year. I think people hung on to things away from the streaming services because they knew the strikes were coming, and they needed to push things into the theaters, which is one of the films we'll talk about today. But I hope I'm wrong. I'm hoping that there's enough youth and youthful creation out there that can figure out a way to create pockets where they can sustain a lifestyle and hit a smaller targeted audience. And I hope that there's avenues for people to find it. But I just, like, it's pretty apparent that, I think that as soon as this becomes palatable and profitable for them to start using AI, I just feel like we're going to start losing a lot. Yeah. And it's I don't know what else to do about that. I mean, like, it'll take a concerted effort of backlash and for people to not utilize it, but I don't know if we'll know. I don't know if we'll.
Well, and will we care? Will enough of us care?
Right.
And will enough of us have a long enough attention span to actually, like, do anything? Right.
And so I guess, going back to what Seinfeld says, I think all media is dying. I mean, I don't believe that I mean, I don't believe that stand-up is going to be the last bastion that is the last man standing, where we're all going to be sitting around listening, because again, it can't get out of its own way. Yeah. And the stuff that becomes popularized is just still the generic Big Bang Theory shit that it was fed upon to everyone anyway.
That's such a bad show. I don't know. Is it still on?
No.
Okay, good.
There's the spinoff is now the Young Sheldon spinoff is the thing.
Okay, look, enough nonsense. I knew that would work you up, and I just sort of wanted to sort of wind you up and let you go. We have movies to talk about, right? And we have a movie to go see tonight as well. We're going to go see The People's Joker, and we'll come back and talk about that, because I'm for one, I'm excited to see that film.
I'm excited as well.
So a couple new films today and a couple old ones. We're going to talk Alex Garland's Civil War and the Sydney Sweeney nunsploitation flick Immaculate. No, wait. No, we're not. We're actually talking the first Omen, which is another different nunsploitation flick where another different nun is pregnant. So, So also in this episode, we will have a special insert of a recent Q&A with the Fort Worth Film Club and Tony Wynn of Spacey Microcinema. And more Bakshi today with Fire and Ice and Hey Good Looking.
All right.
So let's jump into First Omen.
Kick it off, baby. Yeah.
First Omen. You already kicked it off. I know. With the fuck you, Seinfeld.
Fuck you, Seinfeld.
You don't have to be afraid. God has great plans for you. This child is his way.
There's this girl at the orphanage. I think that she really needs someone to look out for her.
Carlita suffers from a touch of madness.
You must be very careful, Margaret. Bad things will start to happen around her. Evil things.
It's all for you. No, don't.
What does any of this have to do with Carlita?
This church has maintained power for thousands of years. Lady will stop at nothing to keep it that way. How do you control people who no longer believe? You create something to fear. I believe the girl is to be the mother.
Mother of what?
It's the mark of the devil.
It's not real. 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 What's not real? Who said that?
This is very real.
So, the first Omen, a young American woman is sent to Rome to begin a life of service to the church, but encounters a darkness that causes her to question her faith and uncovers a terrifying conspiracy that hopes to bring about the birth of evil incarnate.
It's so close to immaculate.
It really is.
Like it's like when I was thinking, I had to go back and read the Wikipedia. Like I was just making sure I don't get mixed up the fucking plot points because they were so.
But they're so close. I mean, this idea of like creating like whole cloth, right? The Antichrist or the Savior. But again, like both entities in both films are looking for ways to hold on to power.
Right. Is it? And see, this is where I get confused. Was it? It's the first Omen where they're like, look, if we can create the Antichrist and control it, then we can control the people so that they don't leave the church. Secularism is on the rise.
Right.
This is like set in the 60s or 70s.
Right, because it's a prequel to...
Right. So and the original was 70, like 2, 4, 6. I can't remember now exactly when it was.
I want to say 76, but I'm not sure.
I think 76. That would make sense because that's after the Exorcist, and you get that kind of hysteria, and like everyone's like excited and starting to make these things, and like the devil was a big thing, right?
Yeah. Because and wasn't it like a sequel to Kill a Mockingbird?
Yes, it was. Scout was actually Damien's sister.
Atticus became a diplomat. It was weird.
Oddly less racism in the Omen.
That is weird. Yeah.
So what the fuck was I saying? Anyway,
secularism is on the rise,
and so they want to bring on the Antichrist in order to scare people back to the church. And the way that they've been doing this is experimentation, where they have a jackal who fucks things and then fucks women, and then God damn it, I'm sorry I said that out loud, but it's in the movie. I didn't write this shit.
No, right.
That's been a thing since the Omen.
It's like it has to be like a relative.
Right, the Satan has to have sex with its own spawn.
Yeah,
in order to host the Antichrist. Okay,
so these girls are born somehow, and then
right, and then they can't. But none of them were like viable. They were all deformed. Right. So so they had these experimentations, and like 13 of them or whatever. And then there's been this one girl who is.
Wait, is that right, or is that Immaculate?
No, this is
because
right.
Immaculate has like the jars, right? Don't they have like the jars of things?
We're never going to figure this part. Yes.
No, because
so
yeah.
Don't get confused, listener, because we are. Look, in Immaculate, those were basically the different versions of Christ that didn't make
right.
it.
Okay, right.
So that's the
from the different like fallen girls or whatever that they bring. Not even like anyway, yeah.
We'll explain both. both plots. We'll have to.
But they're like so close.
Yeah. So the church, the Vatican's been doing genetic experiments, and they've been having this devil jackal fuck nuns, and then the antichrists are born, but they're not. Yeah. But they're all one female, and two they're all kind of deformed and not.
That's right. Yeah.
They're not viable anti-Christians,
and they have to be like specific nuns. Right,
yeah.
That have like, because they have like the 666, and they're like, because it opens with the father, right, the priest meeting with the other priest and giving him a picture of a baby with a name, and
and then
it's convoluted.
So this movie, like, okay, and just to kind of like go through the whole damn thing, like this, so this nun comes over from the United States, and she is rooming with this other nun before they've taken their vows of nunship. And they're partying in Rome and flirting with boys, and they're both attractive young ladies. And then one of them starts to realize that things aren't, as they seem, because one of the nuns there like sets herself on fire after she realizes there's a girl there's students that are at this.
It's like an orphanage, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And so one of the girls is kind of weird and quirky and draws weird, as you do.
She's a goth kid
in horror films, right?
She's that goth girl you knew in high school.
But she befriends her, and then and then this other like good priest who's been excommunicated comes and says, "Hey, be careful, because there's people like us who just love Jesus, and then there's people like the church who are like, you know what, they just want to hold on to power, and you got to know who's who, and I need you to get me these files, because evidently we're keeping files on our nefarious deeds, and because that's necessary.
It's always necessary the downfall.
That to keep files on all of the deformed children, that the deformed, unviable, antichrists
vessels
that we didn't make work.
Right.
So we're going to document all of it, so we learn from our mistakes, and then we also have an evidence trail.
Yeah.
And so anyway, she, it turns out that she's the nun that comes over. They don't give her vows, and she's actually one of the experiments. She was one of the early ones who was viable, and then she got escorted out to the United States. She came back. She gets fucked by a jackal, and then she escapes. But before she escapes, she gives birth, and then she gives birth to twins, and the church keeps the boy, and she escapes and goes off into the woods to live with the goth girl and her new daughter, twin, only child at this point. This movie was looking for a corner to paint itself into. I don't understand. It's weird. Like, it's weird that both of these, like, I feel like people wanted the first Omen to be better than what it was, and ascribed things to it because it's a female director, and it's about autonomy, and especially birthing
female body horror.
Female body horror, and especially about birthing autonomy, especially in this day and age. But I don't think it does any of those things well. I think the imagery is cool. I think the imagery is shocking, and I think I think that was what this movie had in spades, but I don't understand tying it. Like, who is calling for an Omen prequel?
Right.
This is look, we can, don't romanticize the original Omen trilogy, which was really a quadrilogy when you make the TV movie, and then there was a remake. Like, the remake made a shit ton of money, but no one liked it. And so they never did anything with it. The original was mildly well received, and the other two were just like, this, what the fuck is this all about? Because the second one just ramps up the killings, and then the third one, Sam Neill he just acts by moving his eyes back and forth, basically. Look, I enjoy them for what they are, but like, honestly, the original Omen is kind of boring. There's a couple of good kill scenes in it. I mean, there's some notable striking scenes, and where the woman, where the nanny hangs herself, and I'm doing it for you, Damien. And then there's the
callback and this one. I mean, there are those like Easter eggs there, right? For the callbacks back to the 76 version in this one.
Had you made this just a story about a girl being pressured by a religious organization in order to to maintain power. I think that's an interesting story. I don't think tying it into the Omen mythos is a good idea.
Or it doesn't really add to it.
Right. And it also like it removes all the stakes, right?
Yeah.
Because now
you know what's, I mean,
you know Damien's going to live, right? I mean, you know that the baby's going to be born. You know that, and there's nothing about it. Like, there's nothing about his mom in the original canon. There's nothing about him having a sister in the original canon. So that whole piece of it seems like it's supposed to be, like a oh shit moment, like, right? But there's nothing there to it. And so I felt like the birthing imagery was what this thing had going for it. And I think everything else was, well, we'll ascribe our own feelings of what's going on in the world today to those images. And then that's really about it.
Yeah. Because, I mean, both of these films have fairly, well, I don't know. I guess maybe they're not overt political messages. I mean, but it does seem.
They have to be, right?
I mean, I think so. I mean, I think you have two women who become pregnant basically through sexual assault.
Right.
Right. And
I
are
mean,
told
she's raped by a jackal. Let's
right. Okay. Right. Yes. I was gonna use like a different sort of like word, but so these two women are basically just reduced to vessels, two things. Right. And this is all done by these men in power with religious ideology.
Right.
I mean, it's hard not to see the parallels in today with that. Right. I mean, especially with the overturning of Roe and everything else. Yeah. I mean, and they result in these like monstrous births, if only metaphorical, like monstrous births, right?
Right.
That endanger both mothers.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that political message is there, but I mean, you know, is that, I don't know that makes up for some of the other shortcomings of the film.
Well, I think you undercut it when you tie it to a horror franchise that, and like I said, like once you know, like that's why I think Immaculate is so much better than the first Omen is, because there are stakes involved. You don't know what's going to happen, and the ending of Immaculate, is just fucking brutal, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just it is such a like. I'm surprised more people aren't really talking about that ending.
I know. I was surprised when that happened. I'm like, I've not heard anything about this.
Right.
And why?
So Immaculate, the story in Immaculate is Sydney Sweeney gets called to Rome. She is already a nun, and she's going out to Rome to work in a nunnery that is takes care of old nuns as they're about to die.
I hope everyone just like in their head went, "Get thee to a nunnery." I hope everyone out there has like a Shakespeare, like Hamlet reference. Right?
And so she arrives, and then very quickly realizes that when she's too hot to be a nun, and everyone's everyone's suspicious of her, and that she's being befriended by other other elder priests. And it turns out that at this nunnery, they have one of the original spikes that was used in Christ's crucifixion. And so there's been a priest there who's been doing biological experiments to extract the DNA in Jurassic Park of Jesus back into life, right? To do the second coming. And so they impregnate Sydney Sweeney because she's a virgin birth. So this would be the next virgin birth. And they weirdly question her. They impregnate her, and she does a urine test or something, like, and they find out she's pregnant. But then the whole thing is, once Sydney Sweeney figures out what's going on and she knows that she's been impregnated, she has to figure out a way to escape, because all these nuns everyone is in on the bit.
Even the other nuns, because a lot of them, I mean, we get that one nun who's so angry that Sydney Sweeney is pregnant, right? And we find out, or, you know, kind of through conversation, that almost every nun there undergoes this without them knowing. Right. Yeah.
And so she is able to fake her. She fakes a miscarriage, so they'll take her out of the monastery and take her to the hospital, and so she can escape. And then there's a whole like chase sequence, and there's not really any sort of supernatural overtones. It's just malicious
science.
Right. And so the end of this, and if you hadn't seen it, skip ahead, a few minutes in the podcast, but at the end, she's crawling through the muck and trying to escape, and she's made her way where she's gotten away from the priest and she's in this field and she starts to give birth. And so she gives birth, and it's not, that scene is actually not, you hear it. It's very visceral, but it's not on screen really.
It's a close up of her like screaming face,
right.
which is
powerful.
intense
She's
in its
covered in
own.
blood, right?
Yeah.
And then so you hear the baby like falls to the ground, and this is the second coming of Christ, evidently. And you hear it gurgling and kind of growling. It's kind of like real guttural. Yeah. And so you're kind of left to believe, okay, what is this thing? And then she just takes a rock and fucking smashes it.
That's it.
And that's the end of the movie. She smashes this baby, kills it. And I think that message is such, like, say what you will about the trappings of horror and how this is all executed, because there's a lot of tropes in this, and there's a lot of like misdirection and the whole, what you get with a scary movie, right? But I mean, like, that message of a woman being forced to give birth and then saying, fuck you, I'm not going to do it. And I think that's a much more powerful statement. And I'm surprised that people aren't like, one, there's not a side that's just like, fuck this movie, and like, I'm really pissed at it. And there's some movies like, yeah, this is what's going to fucking happen.
Right.
Like, and again, I don't think people are going to be smashing babies in the street, but I mean,
no, but I mean, again, like, it is a metaphor.
It's a metaphor, right?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, but yeah, I was so surprised that more people weren't like really pissed off about that. I mean, I thought it was a brilliant ending. I think she's good. I don't think there's any reason to pick on Sydney Sweeney. I think she's,
Look, it's interesting, right? I think it's interesting from a perspective of she seems to be leaning into her quote unquote hotness, right?
Oh, that's right.
Call back to last episode. Yes. Like, if you look at her SNL episode, she does the Hooters sketch, and it's all about, I don't have any problem with that, really. I mean, like, own who you are, and like, and especially like, if you can monetize that in a healthy and safe and consensual way while you're young, absolutely do it, because Hollywood will spit you out as soon as they possibly can.
And as soon as you're no longer sort of attractive in the way that they want.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah, to call her out, which is, we're referencing an incident that happened with a female producer in one of her classes at Columbia, or, somewhere like bourgeois and liberal institution. It's like, I don't get Sydney Sweeney. She's like Pauline Kael smoking a cigarette. Like, like Edna Krabappel. I don't get Sydney Sweeney. What? You tell me what this girl's all about.
There are times where I wonder what Pauline Kael would say about some of these films and some of these actors and some of the things going on. The majority of the time, I don't care what she would say.
She can't act. She's just a pair of tits. Why do you want her on your movie?
Right.
Who was a good actress?
Well, I mean, and I mean, not to belabor all of this, but
ugly as the day is long, but she was a great actress.
Good. I mean, there is this double standard, right?
That was a good actress.
That was good. There is this double standard of like, yeah, if you're either too pretty. Right, so you can't be a good actress, right? But then, like, you're ugly, so no one wants you in your movie either, right? It's so silly.
Yeah, you can't.
But I mean, but then, I mean, you look at some of these men who have had like long careers as like character actors, and you're
who was Emmett Walsh? I mean, for example, like,
no, sure. Who's the guy? You saw the Matt Reeves Batman film, right? And then Colin Farrell played the Penguin and all this makeup. Now, who's the guy who actually looks like that character? What's his name? Oh. You know who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Right? But there were people who actually said, like, why not just get that guy to play that role? He looks just like him. I'm like, oh, man, like, that's rough, though. But it's true.
Right.
And that's what, like, you don't get that with actresses.
That's what led like Favreau to like lose weight prior to Swingers, was because he lost the role of fat ass in Shawshank Redemption, the guy who gets to the prison and they beat the shit out of him and kill him. He lost out on that role, and like he was also the chubby guy in Rudy. And so it was just a matter of like, I can't be this guy like and do what I want to do in Hollywood. But yeah, it's a I don't know. Hollywood's a weird fucking place. It's got to be. Like, I saw a TikTok the other day about how Black culture was looking at certain films and how they viewed them in a different light. And one of them was The Truth About Cats and Dogs. And it was like, okay, you're telling me that Janine Garofalo is the ugly one here.
I know.
Like, I don't understand this. Like look at this poster. Like, you got Uma Thurman and Janine Garofalo is the ugly. Like, what the fuck is going on, white people? Like, we can't connect here. This just doesn't make any sense.
And even, I mean, I think we've talked about this. I don't know if it's like that film exactly, but yeah, like you can't tell me Janine Garofalo is
and she's gorgeous
ugly
on the
in
poster.
any. I know. But she's the dumpy friend. No,
I know they always try to play her like that. When in Reality Bites and Romeo and Michelle, they tried to play her. But yeah, she was always at the bare minimum cute and like.
Oh right.
I mean,
right.
It was just so this idea of like. Yeah, that she's so grotesque that she has to Cyrano de Bergerac this fucking role.
Okay, let's move on.
Yeah.
All right.
So Sexy Nuns. It's a good time for sexy. It's a hard time for Sexy Nuns. But if you want to see Sexy Nun movies,
well,
you got two to choose from.
Yeah.
And I would say go see Immaculate.
Look, it's a good time if you're a fan of hot nuns.
Right.
If you were an altar boy,
right.
Yeah. Then hey. Go for it. All right, let's don't. Let's talk about Civil War, Alex Garland's new film.
All across America, critics are raving about the movie event of the year.
It is American, 100%. That's what I'm talking about.
Cool.
Me in here, we in here.
On to DC.
Are you serious? The United States are vaporized. They shoot us on sight in the Capitol.
I've never been scared like that before, and I've never felt more alive.
Holy fucking shit!
You watch. Soon as DC falls, they'll turn on each other.
Whatever happens, we don't quit.
Oh my God.
You don't want to miss this.
God bless America.
Civil War. Rated R. Get tickets now.
A journey across a dystopian future America following a team of military-embedded journalists as they race against time to reach D.C. before rebel factions descend upon the White House. Okay, none of that's actually like true.
Right, they're not like...
It's not really a dystopian future America. It's like an alternate reality, right? An alternate now.
Right.
And they're not embedded.
Although I would say it's very possible that it is the future because they talk about I don't know when it would have kicked off, right? But they talk about like the Antifa's massacre and things like that.
Yeah,
like
but I mean that could have been. I just mean like that. That could have taken place 3 years ago.
Sure,
the Antifa massacre, right? They finally found like the membership list of Antifa,
right? Sydney Sweeney,
Sydney Sweeney, and
that producer out of Columbia,
and those
Jerry
other
Seinfeld,
like liberal
Sebastian Maniscalco, and
Louis C.K.
Nate Bargatze,
and they're not embedded, which is why there's so much heightened danger wherever they go. Right? I mean, they are probably working for wire agencies or whatever. I think
they said Reuters.
Yeah, that's right, Reuters. So they're
Reuters still exists.
So
they work for BuzzFeed.
You know what? Probably, yeah. It's a branch of Fox or whatever, right?
Top 10 things the president said, and you won't believe number 7.
As he was dying.
Right.
And I don't know that it's so much a race against time. I mean, the race against time is because they want to get the last
they want the
shot,
scoop,
right? They want the story, right? I mean, so this like race against time makes it sound like they're going to in some way save someone or like save the situation, but that's not it, right? There is no bomb to be diffused per se, right? They want the story.
When you're editing this together, can you insert really, really loud gunshots just throughout this?
I will try. Yes. I should load those onto like the effects pads. So this is, I mean, you mentioned this and you're right, but I do think he uses sound so much better in other places.
Yeah.
Right.
Agreed.
I mean, I think he uses music well. I think he knows how to build an atmosphere and mood through the use of sound. So that, I don't really know why those had to be cranked up so much, other than he just wanted to be like, look,
right?
this is how it would really sound if it was that close to you. I don't know.
Yeah, so we follow a old hand journalist, war photographer essentially, played by Kirsten Dunst, and she has a young upstart who kind of inserts herself into the equation. She wants to be a photojournalist.
She wants to be just like
she
her.
wake to be her, right?
Yeah.
And this is played by, what's the girl's name?
Kaylee Spaney.
Kaylee Spaney, who was in Priscilla. It was great. Like, she's having a great couple of films back to back. She's really good in this. And yeah, so we follow them from set piece to set piece, and they.
I mean, it's a road trip movie through a society that no longer exists. Right.
Yeah. And then so we see, we see bits and pieces. They go to a gas station and offer Canadian money, which there's all these like little things, these little vignettes that kind of give you an insight into what's going on. But really what you're seeing is like the real focus and I guess the import of this movie is to show you, one, how difficult it is to document this and to be embedded with, not necessarily, like you said, they're not embedded with any particular set of troops or anything, but they find themselves protected by certain, certain entities during battle.
Yeah.
I think I was trying to come to grips with how this movie was marketed.
Yeah.
And then what it actually is. And then how you could have possibly done it differently. I think it's disingenuous. Like I understand why, because you want to make money. But I think the title and I think the marketing and I think the poster are all very disingenuous.
What was the other movie we just watched that was like that?
The Iron Claw.
And and that we talked about on this parish.
I don't recall. We talk about so many movies that it's hard to keep them all straight.
Where we said like the the previews are not. It's not what this was.
Right. Yeah, I don't remember now.
What the fuck was that?
Yeah, no, I don't know.
Anyway, keep talking. I'm gonna try and remember.
We'll go back and listen to all of our podcasts. See if we can find it.
Yeah, in the next 30 seconds.
And I understand why, but I think the one misstep that this film does is that it names the Western forces. I think the inclusion of California and Texas gives all of the people who want this to be about some sort of reckoning a way to like shit on it a little bit, and then I think it removes a level of suspension for most folks. I would have rather just seen the 2-star flag, and I would have rather have just seen Western forces, because there's nothing about this film that goes into any of the ideology really of any of these warring factions. And you feel like this is just a splintered nation, and there is a group of soldiers who have split off from the White House and DC. But you also get the notion that the White House is essentially secluded, and that DC is an entity unto itself, and that there is a president of the quote unquote United States who's out spouting falsehoods into the ether, and you don't really know who's listening, and that whatever's happening in the United States, we're still fractured, but there's only one real kind of, I guess, movement that seems to be potentially winning or taking back the country. And you ultimately get the idea that, that the press is on the side of the Western forces, right?
And this is kind of what I liked about the film. I like that we have no idea why this happened, right? Because it's like, we're going to show you how everything is fucked up after this. This is the story, right? Nothing works, right? The rules are gone, right? Everything you thought, was a rule is now something different, right? U.S. money has no value, right? Inflation's gone crazy, right? $300 will get you a sandwich. That's it, right? But then we get the idea that there is a kind of like dictator or sort of like, near fascism sort of happening. And that, well, no, that's not what I was going to say. But you don't know who to trust. It is where I was going to go, right? Going back with what you were kind of saying, like you're around, you're out, you're interacting with people, but you never know who you can trust and who you can't. And the scene with Jesse Plemons asking, like, what kind of American are you? I mean, I think that sort of right there encapsulates this idea of, well, I don't know. Maybe we can, work together. Maybe we can't. And how do you know who's who? Right.
Yeah, I think, ultimately, if you look at the movie, right, it seems like that the president has inserted himself into a third term.
Right.
He probably overturned whatever rule of law that existed or any sort of checks and balances. And again, I'm reading into this. So just, this is not necessarily explicitly laid out. But he's turned over whatever checks and balances, and he's kind of existing in his own, enclave, essentially. And that there are, forces that exist that are trying to take it back, and that's what that seems where the press is aligned, and you see a lot of you see all the press basically from their perspective. We get inserted into battle sequences in different cities and like parking garages and abandoned buildings, and then we come across rogue elements that where law has been abandoned. So you go to the gas station and there's two men that are looters that are hung up, and there's no concern about murder or there's no concern about retribution. They're just hung up. There's no trial. There's no jury. They're just executed. You get to the Jesse Plemons part, and he's been killing indiscriminately and creating mass graves. And you get the feeling that, to me, this movie, like, honestly, it probably doesn't go hard enough.
Right.
I think that from a Alex Garland perspective, I wonder where the line was for him in showing like what truly would happen in a breakdown of the United States. And like a lot of it too, like, if the United States broke down, Canadian money wouldn't be worth shit either. But like, there's a lot of things that like, I understand you're not going to show all of the failures, but but not knowing, like, I wanted the tension to be ratcheted up more in the sequences of like when they go through the farmhouse sequence and like they, so they're driving along the road and they're trying to get to DC, and they come upon this farmhouse. It's got this kind of roadblock, and they're being shot at by a distant farmhouse.
With the Christmas stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
And then they kind of trust the soldiers or the people who are in camouflage on the ground, just because they're both being shot at, essentially.
Right.
But there's no reason to trust those people either.
Right.
And then, these moments of the other thing that I had, I really liked this. I really did. I thought it was an impressive, I did too. Fast paced, kept it moving. I think Dunst is awesome.
Fantastic.
And I think the moments of like, I don't think it leaned into the hoorah too much. I do think it telegraphed a lot of its moves. Like, I think the moments of, the culmination and how this movie ends, I'm thinking that's a little like, okay, we get it. One of them was going to die, right? It's a whole thing, right?
I hated the ending.
Right. It really was.
I really did not like it.
And so, yeah, I agree with you.
And what happened is fine, but the way it happened, I'm like,
right. And this weird, okay, so like they want to get to the president to get a last quote for him because they're going to just execute him. When the Western force is captured, there's not going to be a trial. They're just going to look for, they're going to kill him.
So Kirsten Dunst wants to photograph him. Wagner Moura wants to interview him.
Right. And then there's this weird animosity that didn't really exist in the rest of the picture. Like, so when he talks to him, he's like, hey, do you have anything to say? And he's like, please don't let them shoot me. And he's like, that'll do. Or that's enough.
Yeah.
And then it seems like he's weirdly upset with the president, and that hasn't been conveyed at all during the film.
Like, he's angry.
Right.
Like that anger hadn't been there.
Right. And I get it. I get it that his friends have been killed, and like in that it's been a harrowing experience for all of them.
But he has moments where like, and he's the one who really comes off as a kind of junkie, right? And what I mean is like he's a junkie for the action, right? So when they go through that, it is like an abandoned building or parking garage, right? And they're following the action, and they're shooting images, and he's just pumped. He's just like, oh my God, this is amazing, right? And then, right, that turns into some other kind of anger, and I don't quite get that.
And like a lot. I think a lot of the emotional, not a lot, but the emotional beats aren't necessarily earned, especially at the end, and especially as you're trying to attach them to what's a spectacular sequence on screen of like us blowing up the Lincoln Memorial, and like there's all this war action happening among the monuments in DC that Dunst's character has a a panic attack.
Yeah.
And that's like, she's been so stoic the entire film. Like I get, but here's the thing.
Well, and then we had sort of like a transference too, right? Like a transcendent moment where
the student becomes a teacher kind of thing, right? And it's a weird, like, what is he trying to say with, so the student, she puts herself in peril to get a photograph. And she's in the middle of this hallway, and there's going to be gunfire. So Kirsten Dunst's character pushes her out of the way, and of course,
she takes the bullet.
She takes the bullet in the back, and then the student takes a picture of her as she's been killed in this kind of heartless manner. And I get it. I guess it just seemed like that's so on the nose of like, we're going to transfer the spirit of this stoic, like not heartless, but like,
but hardcore,
right?
No nonsense. And I mean, and that was a callback moment to the earlier in the movie where I know, and it's like, oh, didn't see that coming, right? Like but it's like, because she asked Kirsten Dunst, well, if I get killed, are you going to take that photo,
right?
And so she does that,
and I think, I would have preferred this to be kind of the Day After or a Threads kind of movie where it's like almost a faux documentary to a certain extent. Not that we need to have interstitials or explanations or anything like that, but if you were just,
I don't think Garland knows how to do that though.
I don't think so either.
Because I think I think he's so much of a sort of poetic storyteller. I mean, all of his films have that same kind of the same kind of movement, the same kind of dreamy quality, the same kind of poetic visual language.
It's just it's such a weird pedantic plot to be going along with this lyrical film.
Well, this is right, but I think that's kind of an interesting juxtaposition, and this goes with the idea of having our kind of POV characters be journalists and specifically like photojournalists, where and Dunst even says like all we do is observe. Right? And so we're just watching people watch, essentially.
Right.
Which, I mean, is a kind of powerless position. I mean, they have power in sort of the image making, but really they have no power action-wise. Because, Dunst comments that, as I was taking these pictures and sort of sending these images home, I thought I was sending a warning of like, don't do this.
Right.
And none of it mattered.
Right.
So I do like that because I think there's a commentary of, okay, one, all we can do is sort of watch this stuff happen. But then are we being lazy in just watching? Do we need to take some kind of action? And what does that look like? And are we even able? I mean, look, I think this ties in well with stuff that's going on today. This is why I love this podcast, because I don't have to think about the news. Right. I get to take a break from the shitty news of the world and talk about movies that reference the shitty news in the world. But I do think, students are getting driven out of protest by National Guard and different police departments. And I don't know what we do about any of this.
Right.
I don't know what we do as sort of regular citizens or even sort of citizens with artistic leanings and other ways of getting ideas out. What do we do? How do we do anything that affects it?
And you see, and how do we react to like this being presented to us, especially from a trailer perspective? Because if you're looking for this as a incredible war movie, or if you're looking at this as some sort of comeuppance for liberal like assholery, like,
or even like the
or
the opposite,
versa, right? Or comeuppance of fascism, you're not going to get that.
That's not what it is, right?
So I think it's weird to insert this Skywalker journey for.
I know, Kaylee Spaney,
right. I mean, like Kaylee Spaney being like this, Padawan, and then having Obi-Wan sacrifice himself at the end of it is a weird. So it's a weird turn.
I did not know,
but I don't think it diminishes, and I think you can ignore it for everything else that this film does. But I do feel like that, like I feel like years down the line, whatever happens in this country, like when we look back on Civil War, I think that's going to be the thing that stands out about this movie is like, oh, well, that's kind of, I mean, like that may not be, because everything else is going to seem dated, right? This is not a movie that stands the test of time. Like this is not something like people aren't going to go back to this and go, well, that was the moment we should have paid attention, and then everything went to shit, right? It's just going to go to shit slowly and surely, but. But I like it. I would recommend people see it. And I do think, I don't think it's important. I don't think that this is a film that's going to change minds. I don't think this is going to be a film.
What about Hearts?
Maybe Hearts. Pancreas is definitely, but that's basically it.
Sure.
I don't think this is going to be a warning call as some like might have wanted it to be.
Yeah.
This is not as harrowing. Like this isn't The Day After, right? This is, and again, say what you will. I understand The Day After is not, looking back on it from a 1980s made for television lens is not, like Threads is a much more daunting, like nuclear war.
Well, I mean, and this is not Armageddon.
Sure. But I don't think people are going to go, I don't think this is going to be like, oh, you know what? I probably should put away some of my fascist thoughts because this could actually happen here. Right?
No, unfortunately. And I mean, I wonder if any form of art is capable of doing that.
Right.
Today.
I'm not sure.
I don't think if you listen to some of the people that have these kind of, fascist leanings and even just assholery leanings, I don't know how you change their minds.
It's not going to be done via a movie that they can easily dismiss, right? I mean,
or any kind of art because they probably don't like art.
True.
One more. Speaking of that, though, I think this film too, as much as it's concerned with like political type stuff, I think this is also a film about images. I mean, again, we have photojournalists and we see them composing pictures, right? Composing images, taking images, and we see some of those images. At the same time, Garland is nothing if not concerned with what his movies look like. Right.
Oh, absolutely.
And so we get some of these great shots, right, throughout. And I think this is a tamer movie of his too. But so like if you're not paying attention, you'll miss some of these like great kind of reflections, right, or things happening kind of in a corner, right, or the way the light changes in certain spots. So I thought that was a kind of meta-contextual way to watch that film too.
Yeah.
Cool. I like Garland. Also,
this is the last film. So.
All his films have. Is it?
He said that he doesn't want to direct anymore. He's going to co-direct.
I thought he walked that back.
He's going to co-direct this film. I can't remember who he's doing it with, but yeah, he said well, I don't know. Maybe he did, and I didn't read that.
Or maybe it was like taken out of. I don't know.
Well, I think what he did was I think he heard Seinfeld's comments and he was like, "Well, fuck it, I'm just going to do stand-up."
What Jerry said, right? I do like that. All of Garland's films and his TV show devs. The leads are all women, right, and they're all strong women, right? I mean, dealing with all these myriad problems, but I don't. Is he one of the few directors doing that? I mean, male especially, but just in general.
I would think so.
Does he pass the Bechdel test
in this movie?
All his films.
Oh, all of them.
Yeah.
I don't know. Men would be hard to pass the Bechdel test. Because there's only one female in it.
There's two.
Yeah, but I don't think
there's three.
Are there?
Yeah, there's a cop, lady cop.
Okay.
And her friend.
Sure.
Look, I think
were they good looking? Because otherwise, I just didn't. I just lumped them in with men.
Well, apparently not good looking enough.
They should have got that.
They should have got Gene Wilder.
Jeannie Wilder was great. Flat as a board. I tell you what. She could act.
I think men.
Around men.
I think men is unfairly maligned.
I do too. I like men.
Okay, good. Oh, I'm glad we agree on something today.
That's the sound clip that we needed. I like men.
I like. Go for it.
Let's do it. Well, thank you again, Tony, for programming this with us and for us. Really appreciate it. Before we get into the film, I wanted to give you an opportunity, and because I'm not sure if everyone's familiar with Spacey, but going to give us a rundown of what it is, and we'll ask some questions about it as well.
Sure. I run Spacey, which is a micro cinema in Oak Cliff. It's inside Tyler Station, and it's really just a screening room. It's a 650 square feet room with 35 seats, and we just play a lot of movies. I mean, it's really kind of just about like when we're in the world where a lot of these independent movie theaters are kind of dying out because of shifts of consumer interests and whatnot, we have to kind of reimagine what communal and gathering spaces are. And so I saw that there wasn't really a venue that was dedicated to like the moving image in a very DIY context. And so I think it was really important to kind of try to cultivate that more and more, and so that more people can hopefully do their own, whether it be more film clubs or even something more permanent. I just hope that more people kind of start their own, whether it be at bars, their backyards, etc. Because although it's very flattering that I have people drive from Fort Worth, Frisco, Houston, Austin, etc., it's flattering, but it's also just kind of largely concerning that people have to go so far for alternate programming. So I think it's really important more than ever to kind of find people near you and kind of commune by your shared interests.
And along with that, could you talk a little bit about your programming aesthetic?
Sure. I try not to be pinned down. It's more fun that way. I feel like I generally do gravitate towards people on the fringes of society. Maybe, which is why why this movie was played. But I generally do gravitate towards those people. So I think because of that, I do skew, but I'm more, I resonate more with stories by like queer and marginalized communities. But I'm always looking for like textures I've never seen before, colors I've never experienced before. And then most importantly, I think as well, although I do most of the programming, for me it's way more important and a lot more fun to try to have other people to do the programming, whether it be in a film context or if they want to host one-offs of other events like a book club, or I host fragrance swaps, so something similar to that. Doing more of that, I think, is just more interesting because you can't have everything to be a monolith, and it's important to encourage fluidity, especially when you have communion involved.
So what were some of you, how did this idea, where were you inspired by the idea? How did this kind of germinate and get, and like come to fruition?
Oh, this idea of this microcinema? I mean, I'm not gonna say like it was like I was like, you know, a kid, and then it was always my dream to own a theater. It was never that. I actually got into film very accidentally. I think I was just like curious on like the real estate options, and I was like, let's see if there's actually something that's like fits the size. Because, you know, the cliche really is true that everything is bigger in Texas. And so it was really kind of finding something that was like very, very intimate, to where I think when you're in a place that's so small, it really does kind of encourage activities that you wouldn't otherwise do in a more traditional setting. You know, I think it's really important to kind of sometimes challenge these colonial like ideas of like starting things on time or being quiet the whole screening. I think if people want to go on their phone, or if they want to walk out, or if they want to boo during a movie, I think that's like amazing. It's really great constructive feedback to not only me, but then of course the peers around you. But I think I was just really inspired by the city. I think the city can be very daunting in terms of its sprawl. So I think it was really important for me to kind of find how can I bridge the sprawl somehow, and acknowledge that there are ways around it, even though the city by design can be extremely hard to deal with in terms of trying to get people to come out, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, there's some microcinemas that I do follow, but I think the larger ethos of encouraging alternate programming kind of spreads through all mediums. I'm always looking for venues, like music venues are also encouraging alternative music, et cetera, et cetera.
A year in, or almost a year in, is there anything you have been surprised by, and is there anything that you're really looking forward to as far as the growth of Spacey?
I think my biggest surprise was actually how many parents that come. Not with their children. I wouldn't say we're like the most family-friendly place. We sometimes play like pornographic movies, etc. But it's more like I was just and maybe it's because I'm very naive because I actually don't want children and like just I'm never around parents a lot. But I was always so blown away by how many parents who come out, because I'm not gonna lie, I thought once you became a parent, life was over.
You just mean old people.
No,
you just mean people like past
no.
the age of 30.
I have like 50-year-old single people who come, and I'm just like, they're living life. But with these parents, you know, it's like even more commendable that they still have such, you know, amazing curiosity, and they try to make time to get out of the house. I think that's really awe-inspiring, because that kind of shows that they're passing on those same type of curiosity and ideas to the children, and then of course the people surrounding their children as well. So I think that's been the most inspiring thing. In terms of the larger growth, more and more people have been really supportive of it, and I just hope like later down the line that you know, of course, more people start their own. When it doesn't have to be like a permanent place, like y'all do it monthly. I think that's a really great cadence as well.
You guys have any questions? Yeah, Sean.
What's been your biggest challenge in starting Spacey?
There's quite a few, but you know, it's like one of those things in which, you know how when someone opens up like a restaurant, for example, the stakes are so high because the overhead is so high that you generally have to put in all your time, all your resources, all your money, everything, like you're 1,000% to it in order to make sure it succeeds. Versus I'm stretched kind of thin. I do like another full-time job. I have like a day job, and then I have a lot of part-time like freelance jobs. So I'm stretched in a lot of other things. I try to still have a social life, etc. So I'm working my ass off, but I'm not giving my complete all. So I think with the attendance, sometimes it was like what I expected, which was good, but sometimes it doesn't even pay the rent, which is like totally fine for me, because I understand like you do kind of have to grow an audience, and you have to be patient with that. And I'm also doing a shitty job marketing it. But it's also like when you have a city like this that's kind of, I guess, used to a certain maybe ethos in the DIY or something that's more maybe like through like the visual arts or music, the moving image is just very different, especially if, let's say, I mean, and this times right now where things are so costly, so expensive. A lot of my peers and even a lot of my peers even will say that they don't even have time to go watch a movie, let alone at MySpace, but like anywhere, because everyone's just so busy, just trying to make ends meet. And I think if they do want to hang out with people, I mean, if they do want to like have an activity, it's generally to get dinner with a friend, which I'm not gonna lie, if you were to give me the option between going to see a movie with a friend or gonna get dinner, 9 out of 10 times I will get dinner with that friend. So I'm also part of the problem. But movie going it can be very passé. But at the end of the day, I think since the space is fluid, I think I'm just trying to encourage a lot of different activities that are just not film related. I think, you know, that'll hopefully encourage people to see that there are more third places activated in the Metroplex.
Kai.
Would you say you've seen a culture at Spacey grow?
It's okay.
I don't.
Appreciate it.
It's maybe sometimes too early to even say. I think there's I think there's definitely more eagerness. I think I'm feeling that people are hungry for other stuff in the city that they might generally not have the regular exposure to. I mean, I knew it was always there, but kind of seeing it more and more like in my face was, of course, very important. I think people just need to find the spaces that are more activated to do so. So I wouldn't necessarily say I'm creating that per se, but I think maybe just more people are just aware that stuff like this can be possible.
So it's almost like giving the space for it to grow or become.
Yeah, I mean, I don't call it a community space because I have seen the language of the word community being co-opted to no end. Like, I don't want to hear this like new trendy third wave bakery shop that sells $9 croissants to call themselves a community center. Like, I think it's just very bourgeois and like kind of like a slap on my face. But like, it's like a space of gathering though, because people quite literally do gather there. So I think right now that's the only thing I can feel confidently that I can say. But in terms of community, like that is the ultimate goal of I have all types of subcultures who come. Like I want the skaters to come, I want the chefs to come, I want the parents to come, I want every single type of person to come and like intermingle with each other instead of just feeling so segregated, because the Metroplex is like geography, like by design, like an incredibly segregated place.
How you doing?
Hi.
Thanks for coming out.
Of course, thank you.
Yeah, for those who are unfamiliar or haven't been to Spacey yet, can you describe, like, for the audience, like, Tyler Station, like, how it's all set up? And I wanted to ask you, like, how did you find Tyler Station? Like, how did you decide on that being the space for Spacey?
Knock on a certain door at a certain time of day.
Well, it's called, I mean, I use the internet. I use the commercial real estate websites. I just Googled like commercial real estate websites, and I wanted like, it was like the whole like Goldilocks thing. I like wanted to find something that was either like not too big or not too small, and that fit into my budget also, most importantly. So location mattered to an extent. I wanted it to be in Dallas proper because I wanted to reclaim a part in the city that I felt like the city was changing so much, and that in the city center in some ways that you can still have like a constant place that is trying to fight back on like the ever changing city and its like interests in more, I would say, like homogenous activities and or commercial interests. And Tyler Station fit my budget, most importantly. And then the place itself is interesting. It used to be a wax paper factory, and then it got converted to a myriad of businesses. So you have like a brewery, then you have salons, a barbershop, a tattoo parlor, a fighting dojo. It's like really odd. There's so many other places, but I think for me, of course I respect where I do my operations in, which is like a predominantly Black and Latin neighborhood in Oak Cliff. But at the end of the day, I do value the hyper-local, but sometimes I think that when you're into the hyper-local too much, then you get into your own bubble. So I think it was really important for me it was more important for me to find a space to where it fit everything so that I can bring a more international lens to the programming, if anything, because if I relocate somewhere else, I think the ethos will still be there. And sometimes I do kind of think, is it more impactful to actually, for me to like move to the burbs? Because we just don't have these type of places in the burbs and whatnot.
How did you outfit this space?
What do you mean by that?
Like the furnishings and
it's very minimal. It's literally just 35 chairs, a projector, a screen, and 2 posters. That's pretty much it. The chairs I got from OfferUp. The projector I got from eBay. The screen I got from eBay. And the console, I had my friend made it. So, yeah, it doesn't take much. I mean, like, I'll be transparent. Like, me starting it out, it was only like $10K, which I know a lot of money, yes, but like, we played the trailer by sweet man who does I forgot his real name, but like the movie Mutant guy.
Greg.
Yeah. Wonderful. He does great stuff for sure. But I know he's trying to open up his own theater, which is really amazing. And I donated because I believe in it and whatnot. But he's also trying to raise like $500,000 or something like that to like open it. And I think that's extremely commendable. But it's like some of us just don't have that money, or will ever obtain that type of money, or don't want to take out loans. So I think for me, it was kind of showing that you really don't need as much money to start an operation like that. Or if you don't want to spend that 10K, totally fine, just ask people around. You'd be very surprised how sometimes people are willing to give space as long as you're willing to bring a projector screen and projector.
Do we want to talk Chantal?
Yeah, please.
The way you said that makes me just really want to say
no.
Yes. I know. So I think we were talking earlier, and how many first-time Ackerman? Well, this film or Ackerman in general? Okay.
Yeah. Fab.
Right? Thoughts?
I like that it's the only movie that is simultaneously full of bathroom breaks and then there are no bathroom breaks to be had, because I never want to like miss a letter. I need to know if Elaine and Lily finally get back together or not, or if more of her dad's abscesses, or
if they burst, or when they burst, or how the shop is doing.
Right.
This is true, but also like this might sound weird, but such a rewatchable film in that you watch it over and over and you find something new each time, or you focus on somebody in a different shirt each time, right? You see the guy in yellow in the subway the first time you watch it, then you see someone else, and there's just so many moments like that where you keep coming back to it.
Lots of plaid pants.
It's true.
Yeah. I was hoping to see more Paisley, to be honest. I know. Craig, go.
Waiting for someone to yell, Warriors!
Come out to play.
Well, actually, that really is an interesting component to where like you don't hear people's voices outside of the obvious voiceover. It's just like you get a part of the city, but you don't get the whole city. So it's always, I think it is definitely rewatchable.
You get the noise of the city. You get all the background
to a degree.
Of the city.
Yeah.
And it makes New York look like such a lived-in place. And obviously, it's such a dichotomy from what her mom believes New York to actually be. This place of danger and a place of busy, and you lose yourself. And I think that's part of the beauty of this movie, and just the weird way to say the narrative of it all is to watch these movements walk by and watch this this actually lived in place that New York actually is, especially then. Yeah.
Well, I mean the texture in this film too, like not just the grit, but the different textures that we get, right, as we kind of go through everything. And then Craig, go ahead.
Has anyone seen James Gray's Little Odessa?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For some reason, that movie kept on coming into my head when watching this, where like New York is like observed.
Yeah, it's probably all of us. Don't worry about it.
It's like New York that almost deliberately avoids observing like the scenic New York skyline and everything. And like part of me thought like towards the end of this book, they're actually gonna like pull back and you'll see like the sky. But anyway, like with James Gray, like with Little Odessa, so much of New York is being told us by being in the bedrooms. This film being in transit, cars, the trains, sitting out front of a store. Like essentially this woman's life and what's being told. And for me, personally, it's just really fascinating to watch because like, it's lived in like a real place rather than just New York being used as a set. Like this is a place where life began and it's very similar to our own.
Yeah. So nobody was yelling.
Well, they were, but they weren't. I guess they couldn't be recorded. Although it was interesting to watch the how cars and stuff were used to like almost interrupt the monologues and stuff. But I don't know what that means. But I'm curious about that.
Well, you know, I think you can always just see it as like three separate, like, I guess like textures, which is like voiceover, and then the camera, which is of course like extremely fixed, and then like what type of like organic sounds you actually do hear. And then, you know, I guess first starting out, you do clearly hear the letters, and you always have, you know, these very loving and very full sign-offs. And then I guess the more the movie progresses, of course you have like your moments to where like the letters come like pretty quickly, and then they come back even sometimes like in the surplus, which, you know, can be expected if you want to reply. But then you have like moments where like, yeah, you do have like a train or a car like interrupt some of these like letter writings, and it's just kind of like, it kind of goes back to these ideas of like subjectivity, and like, is it kind of like the subjectivity of like the mom's like anxiety and eagerness trying to like, you know, get another reply, and or like the eagerness of her trying to send it off, or is it like you know, the daughter in terms, I guess, like her just kind of even her relationship with the city, and then it kind of maybe deteriorating, or her just kind of like fighting for her life, trying to have the intrinsic motivation to write the next letter. So yeah, I think like the increase of these like infrequencies of sound, especially, is always so fun to pick up in this movie, especially because like I love when you first start out, the only thing you kind of really hear is like the humming of the projector, which I love, and then like, you know, then it just kind of gets into this more ominous thing, and then the last thing you kind of hear is just the waves, which is like the new sound that you haven't been introduced before, but that you kind of are shown very lastly, and then the birds. Yeah. Which, that was like crazy. That was like an action movie to me. I was like so like engrossing.
One more thing, I felt like the interrupting of the reading, to me that was like the daughter being distracted.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
yeah.
Totally. That can be perceived that way, absolutely.
I did have the thoughts while watching the movie thinking, okay, except for like the little kids, like nearly everybody in this film is probably dead by now, right? And then, like at the very end, when you see, yeah, well, it's just like, but when you saw the Twin Towers, and you were like, ooh, it hit me like a wall of bricks. Like, it's a different New York. Like that New York will never ever exist again. And I really found it touching that we had this glimpse into that world when the towers were new and shiny and pretty, and nothing else was obstructing, you know, that view. But yeah, it's a little bit sad, but also I was happy to witness it.
Well, even if you think of New York in the 70s, because this was 76, right?
Whatever.
But going into the 80s, I mean, that New York, I mean, really doesn't exist. The grittiness, the sort of, you know, heading towards bankruptcy. But this film is still a love letter, I mean, in so many ways, to that city, right? To that city on the verge of bankruptcy, to you know, Carter telling New York to fuck off or whatever, right? You know, a series of postcards, you know, dotted with X and O's at the end, right? Yeah. Garrett.
I just wanted to talk about it in the context of documentary filmmaking, as well as sort of, I guess, the influence of the avant-garde, and I think, you know, it bears more of a resemblance to sort of these films of the 20s, the sort of like Vertov and you know, City Symphonies, these sort of things, rather than the sort of explosion of verite documentary making in the 60s with Robert Drew and Hannah Baker and the Maisels, this sort of filmmakers. It seems like her influence is more from this older generation, as well as this sort of reflexivity of structuralist film, or sort of, I guess, you know, like Warhol's Empire or something like this. Yeah. You know, it's definitely out of its time, but of its time. It's sort of building on these things. It's very interesting.
Yeah. You want to jump on that?
I don't think I have anything
No?
to say. No.
I mean, we were talking a little bit about the structuralist film stuff before the screening, and you see that in her use of the static camera, of the rephotographing different sites over and over and over at different times of the day, the kind of flickering and strobing of just the use of film, right? And yet it seems unlike anything else, really. Right, so yeah, influenced by. Oh, and we talked about Mikas too, and how, you know, she befriended Mikas when she moved to New York, and Babette, the cinematographer, Mongol. What's her last name? I'm gonna butcher it. We'll just call her Babette, right? But yeah, how it's just like an utter singularity, right? And how, I don't know. You want to add to this? Now I'm starting to just babble.
No, it's fine. I agree. I think it's wild to me that how self-assured really her films, especially at such a young age, are. The first three, particularly this one,
and even Hotel Monterey. I mean, the confidence to say, I'm just going to film in this hotel. I'm just going to stick a camera here, right? No sound, and just see what happens. This is the other thing that, like, under her eye, the most boring things become magical. And I find that fascinating, how this, like, the mundanity of everything, just there's like a sheen or a sparkle that somehow comes out.
Yeah,
She's a magician.
I'd love to know like how much film was shot for this, and what her editing process was, and to narrow down the actual shots that she got. Because it's easy to kind of dismiss that you're just filming in a car that's moving down 10th Street. But then as the car stops, and the composition of the red van and the green awning and how it's all positioned in the scene is just amazing. And then there's just sequences that I mean, it's so like, and again, this film lulls you to sleep in a lot of ways, like not sleep in a bad way, but like it just kind of takes over where you're just letting it wash over you.
It's like the waves lapping at the end. You just sort of.
But as there's a weird anticipation, like every time a subway car stops and opens, about what's going to be behind the door. When you see the kind of like the lovers that are flirting across the, you know, on the other platform, and then
she's playing with the buttons on his shirt,
right? Yeah. And they get on the train and they disappear. There's just so many moments. And I think even the breaking of the fourth wall in a lot of cases, where you get the characters that acknowledge the camera. And obviously the man in yellow is the most striking, right? Because you're just like, well, this guy fucking hates whatever's going on. And but you know, as they pass the car and the man just kind of looks over and smiles, there's these moments that are really just like genuine. And I don't know, watching this, there's so many stories that aren't being told that you kind of want to live in this moment and live in this film.
And she does not waste any real estate of a frame. Like, there's something going on everywhere, and you have to believe it's purposeful. Everything that's happening there. Elizabeth.
Yeah, it's interesting to me that everybody talks about feeling like this is a love letter to New York, because I got none of that. I didn't feel any particular affection for the city coming across at all. And in fact, if it weren't for like the subway and some other details, I wouldn't probably have even known that this was New York City. This could be any city. Like, to me, the kind of emotional truth that was coming across is the separation from the nuclear family, and like the letter should be compelling because that's your kind of emotional ties that you're moving away from, and you should feel a tug to want to keep in touch and want to move towards that. But yet something about just the mundanity of everyday life and creating your own life somewhere else is boring but compelling enough that you do want to break those ties, you know, like that reminded me of like, well, why don't I call my parents more? There's nothing particularly going on in my life, right? It's just a routine of every day, but yet keeping in touch with my family is not the first thing on my mind, right? So that was kind of what stuck out for me.
I think that's a really compelling point because I think it kind of does fall into this, I guess, like larger ethos that I think, you know, this time around, I think it was more impactful to me, was just kind of like the act of like looking, the act of like feeling, like why do certain scenes maybe like you like look away or like are not as engrossed as maybe other scenes, and you know, I think sometimes that maybe that uncomfortability with how, you know, the duration can be at times, like it can be like similarly striking to I guess the anxiety of how you have in terms, I guess, like wanting to reach out to someone because you get maybe too comfortable with some of the choices that you make. So I think I think the movie for me just always will help me refocus my ideas of like choice and like why I see things a certain way and why I feel things a certain way.
And I think that plays along with some of us feeling like it is a love letter, right? This perception or past experience and how we look at that, right? How we perceive those different scenes, right? Because, I mean, for me, the act of looking in such a longing way and not being afraid to divert your gaze is a kind of act of love in itself. Right?
Kyle, did you have some?
I have an opinion on the movie that I honestly would want to hear feedback on, because it runs really counter to what I normally believe. But I think I would have liked this more if it was dubbed.
Interesting.
I didn't like that I was artificially forced to look down. There's so much going on.
Yeah.
And I didn't like that I had to look down when I want to look there.
I mean, brush up on your
like,
French. I don't know what to say.
Yeah. I mean, it's also like Bresson, right? Where we're hearing Bresson read, and as he's writing, and then we're reading the subtitles. It is.
Well, I mean, I think that's a fair point because, you know, especially in certain scenes where you can actually like read like some of the what you kind of expect to be inaudible, like, you know, I'm sure that people who are watching it in French-speaking countries or French-speaking settings, like they probably did have like a harder time making it out in terms of, I guess, what was said. So I'm sure, yeah, their experience was maybe more, I wouldn't say better, but they had a different takeaway nonetheless, yeah. Textures, yeah.
If you were just listening to it, you're getting an oral texture as well, as opposed to it's two visuals. It's visually you're looking at it and you're reading it. I really like the movie. I don't want to sound like I didn't, but like it'd be even better, I think.
Oh, yeah, well.
The ending would have been a lot different because the film almost decides for you in the subtitles that you're not listening to this woman anymore as she's being drowned out.
Yeah.
Just listened to it and understood French, you would actually caught in bits of like, what she say?
I did find myself kind of watching the bottom of the screen a lot, waiting for like a letter to come back instead of letting my eyes grow as much as probably, you know,
Which is not Ackerman's vision. Ackerman's vision is we're looking and observing the whole thing, the whole time.
I was going to make a comment about language, but yeah.
I have a burning question.
Uh-huh.
So I noticed in one of the first scenes on the subway, I think it was the first subway scene, you see
the reflection in the glass of the woman standing behind the camera, but you don't see the camera in the reflection. And so for the rest of the film, I watched and tried to find a reflection of the camera and could not. Does anybody know
Was that a question? I was like,
do you guys know anything about how she accomplished that? It had to be intentional, and it had to be really difficult because they're driving past cars and windows and so there's reflections at different heights. And I mean, how would you place a camera that it never shows up? You know.
I noticed that too. It had to have been.
She might have had like some kind of like a dark cloth or something over it to kind of like make it more obscure. Because I thought the same thing too when I was looking at the reflection. Because like she's like here, and then there was like a dark.
but you can see bits and pieces. I mean, it's a black 16 millimeter camera, right?
Well, here's the question: why was it that scene, that moment, that she decided to let us peer in and see her?
Well, but you have to like really look too. I mean, you have to. But I mean, like even to see her, you have to like really be looking at that. I look. I mean, I don't know, but I don't think she really cared. I mean, I think she's in the middle of a subway train behind a camera, right? Or Babette's behind the camera. She doesn't care if people see the camera. I mean, they obviously see the camera. I don't think she would care if we saw the camera. Have you ever tried to take a picture through like glass like that? It's pretty tough, right? I mean, to actually get through it. I mean, you've got to set, well, and maybe if you can set aperture and if your film speed's right, depending on what lens you're using, maybe you can shoot through it if you're close enough, right? And at that point, you're not going to see the camera back in the reflection just because of depth of field. So I think that's part of it too. With the way the light is hitting off that window, you're probably not going to see the detail.
Yeah, I also think she probably doesn't care. But also, I think the more you watch maybe her movies, I've always felt that in addition to like her movies, and then of course, like all my favorite movies are all like ghost stories. And I feel like this movie is a really good ghost story, as in addition to her other movies. There's just always like a haunting that's like larger than life. And sometimes maybe just you see a part of her and then you don't. And I don't know, it's almost the same thing, I guess. Like you get a letter one moment, then you don't.
She's like this always present specter.
And anytime that a subway train came on the screen, it was a nice jump scare for me. Anybody else?
Tony, anything else from you?
I don't have anything else, no.
Okay.
All right. No. Well,
oh, wait.
Oh,
Did
sorry,
you have a
Barry,
comment?
yes.
I just wanted to throw out what was missing in this movie. What I didn't get from this movie that you normally get from a film like this is character. Where's the character of the people that are writing letters to each other? Where's the soundtrack of the city as it passes by? There's no music. There's no character.
The train tracks clicking, that's music. The cars honking, that's music, right? The tires on the street in Tribeca, that's music, right? I know, right? But also, Barry, you can't tell me you don't know exactly what kind of mother that is writing those letters. But I think that's what Ackerman would say back, right? Is that those are the characters. The character is the city, not so much the people in the city, right? The mother is defined and drawn by what she writes to her daughter, right? In the context of that relationship. Where if this were a traditional narrative film, I think, yes, that would be something that she would have to answer for, right? But it'd be hard to say that she was actively trying to make characters, quote unquote, right, out of anyone or anything in this film other than the city and the mom through the letters. Because we could even call it like an epistolary form too, right? This story told through these letters. Right, so Yeah, I mean, I think a different type of film, yeah, I'd be right there with you. Like, there's no characters in this goddamn movie. Yeah.
Was it biographical at all?
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah. So she lived in New York from like 71 to 72, 73, and then went back to Brussels. But then they came back to New York in 1976 to shoot to shoot this film, and then do the voiceover from the letters. So.
All right. Well, thanks everybody.
Tony, thank you.
Yeah,
thank
and
you
Tony, thank you.
especially.
Give a round of applause one more time, please. And so, yes,
Thanks, y'all. Thank you to
definitely check out Spacey and check out their schedule. Tony's been gracious enough to allow us to program there. We're working on the details and the dates, but we're looking at a Matsumoto series in July. And so if you liked Funeral Parade of Roses, I always say Prisoner, but Funeral Parade of Roses, we're going to be showing all 4 of his films. And one of them, called The War of the 16-Year-Olds, is nearly impossible to see. So I'm very excited about those screenings. And we'll be back here next month for The Commitments for Ryan. And we will also be doing, I know everyone's been waiting for this with bated breath, we will be doing a live podcast at Winehouse for Why Does the Wilhelm Scream in late May as well.
The 50th
The 50th episode, where we are tentatively going to be talking about the Larry Cohen trilogy, It's Alive, It Lives Again, and The Island of It's Alive. So,
and somehow work in like the Bijou Phillips reboot.
Right, and the potential, yes, and the reboot from 2008, I believe. So thank you guys for coming, and we'll see you next month. Yes, Amber, do you have one more? Yeah,
we will also be much smarter and much funnier the more you drink.
True.
Yeah.
Better looking, the whole 9 yards.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. Appreciate it.
Okay, let's continue on with our journey at Bakshi. Which one do you want to start with? And I will tell you this: I'm going to have very little to say about Fire and Ice. I'm telling you, I'm pretty hot and cold on that movie.
Let's start with Fire and Ice then. Oh, wow.
In an age of myth and legend, the world trembles before the power of Necron, master of evil, ruler of ice. Against him stand Tigra, princess of Firekeep, and captive of the ice demons, Larn, last of a mighty warrior tribe, and her only hope of escape. And Dark Wolf, mysterious avenger, and sworn enemy of the Ice Tyrant. Their courage will be tested. The challenge must be met. The final battle between the armies of the cold and the keepers of the flame is about to begin. Fire and Ice, from the visual imagination of Ralph Bakshi and the dazzling artistry of Frank Frazetta. A fantasy adventure from 20th Century Fox.
At the end of the Ice Age, an evil queen and her son are set on conquering the world using magic and warriors. The lone survivor of a crushed village fights back, as does the king of Firekeep. Here's what I'll say about this movie. Let me say something good about this movie before you do whatever you want with this movie. The not the cast, but the crew on this fucking thing. Screenplay by Jerry Conway and Roy Thomas, who had written the Conan stories for Marvel Comics.
Right.
James Gurney, who did the Dinotopia books, was the background painter, along with the painter of light himself, Thomas Kincaid.
Yeah.
And then the guy that did Aeon Flux also worked on this film. So, I mean, like, that's kind of like a murderer's row of people.
They talked about those guys when Frank Frazetta would come in and they would be like just awestruck and like, this is just so wildly disappointing of a movie. Like, I can see it's a Saturday morning cartoon movie, right? This is not even as fun as Thundar. No, it's not, and it's Like, if you would have cut this up into episodes, it might have been better. Like, where you could have kept it on. Like, but there's nothing to keep your interest over an hour.
It's so boring.
And like, here's what I don't understand about this era. And you know who Bakshi is, and you built your bread and butter on marketing his horniness, marketing his violence, marketing his sexiness. So yeah, there's a big busty and nearly naked female in this. Like, why isn't this more violent? Why isn't this more horny? Like, why didn't you go to the rafters on this film? Like, why didn't you make it some just sex pot? I mean, like, why didn't you make it an actual cartoon version of the first Conan? Right? Like,
Right.
Make it over the top. Make it as gory as you fucking, like, make this rated X. Like, who cares at this point? Like, it just makes no sense, because you've got Frank and you've got Ralph, and like, those two guys are known for tits and ass, and
yeah,
like, I mean, like,
horny cats,
like warranted or not, right? Whether or not that's the truth or not. Like, at this point, you've flashed out on Lord of the Rings. And, you know, so like, why, what are you doing? And like, your Wizards was mildly well received, but
it had legs too.
Right.
Wizards had legs.
Right. And it was, you already did the PG route. Like this story is so awful. Like, it's just, you know, there's evil and there's good.
Well, it's just binary oppositions, right?
Yeah.
There's fire, there's ice, there's good, there's bad.
I will say, like, the rotoscoped fight sequences, I thought were really good. I thought that some of the sword play, and I don't remember the names of the characters because I couldn't be bothered to actually remember them. Like, when they're fighting at the end, and like, but like, I don't know why there's not. Like I said, I don't know why there's not more animated dicks in this.
There are no animated dicks. There's no swinging dicks.
Giving us a reason to watch this, right? Because otherwise, it is just. And again, not that it needs to be ultimately pure. Like, but if you don't have a good story behind it, like, then why are you telling this story? Because the animation's not that compelling.
No,
and so some of the action is, but this is the lowest. In the bottom of the barrel, like, sci-fi that was ongoing at the time anyway. Like, you could have gone out and, like, Henson's doing something better at this time. Disney's doing something better at this time. I mean, fucking, like, even the 3D shit that's going on at this moment, like, are about to happen. Like, you got Krull, you've got all these kind of, like, movies that are, like, B films. Aside from a kick-ass poster, this movie's got nothing going for it.
Well, and they're just trying to kind of capitalize and ride a wave. Right. I mean, it's like, ooh, Conan and Beastmaster, and let's make our own. But it didn't have anything that those other films had. It had nothing to sort of keep you interested. It had no, like, you know, men with wings that, like, dissolve you into juice or whatever. right? I mean, it had none of that.
Like, why didn't you set it in a more realistic setting? Like, why didn't you make it more, like, medieval and Excalibur-esque than some ridiculous Elseworld that doesn't, you know, that is from a 1,000-year conflict that you don't give a shit about, you know, from a fire tribe and another ice age, and, like, you know, and then, like, the stuff that's cool, which is the Hellcat character. Like, you just have him kind of come in and kill a few people and then kill a bunch of flying things to go into the, you know, you're basically your Return of the Jedi flying into the belly of the Death Star.
Yeah.
But it's not that. I mean, I'm giving it way more credit than it deserves, right? It's not that intriguing. There had to have been stories that you could have adapted. There had to have been something that was more compelling than this, and they could not have been happy with this result. Like, they couldn't have thought this was going to make a shit ton of money. And, like, again, once you see what you have, and you're already kind of towing the line between violence and sex, like, give us what we want. Right? I mean,
right.
Give us a reason to watch this. Oh, Bakshi's back. The cat's back. Right? I mean, like, you thought Fritz the cat was something to watch.
We're back with an X, baby.
Fire and ice.
What? Yeah.
We're going to melt your frozen dick off.
Ouch. Yeah. No. And, like, did any of these guys have any fun on this fucking movie?
Yeah, I can't. I mean, it just seems so dour and
It's
so
just-
like. It's
And
just,
it feels like really phoned in too.
right. At least with Wizards, there's a life to it, right? And
Right. That you could tell like he cared about Wizards, right? Now, right.
And there's a level of humor,
but
right?
there's
Like,
but
every
there's
one of
some
these
levity,
characters-
there's some sparkle, there's nothing here.
Right. Every one of these characters is,
and oh my god, the dialogue is fucking awesome. It's just
yeah. They're all the same, right? They all behave the same. Like even Hellcat, which again, like, is the coolest of the cool. Like, and he looks cool. I mean,
I know.
It's just.
But like, what is his deal?
Right. No idea.
Okay.
No idea.
Okay, because I'm like,
He's
did
like
I
a mercenary or something?
Did I
and,
fall
like,
asleep during? I mean, I probably did, but I'm like, why does he want to go after these people? Like, why? Dark Wolf is his name.
Dark Wolf.
I know. No, I was like,
Hellcat kind of.
I'm
cool
like,
anyway.
it's not Night Wolf, right? What is it? I'm like, because I couldn't remember.
But also, like, if you're gonna make Tiga your main character, then give her more agency too. Like, I mean,
She's just a pair of tits running around.
Right.
I mean, that's all they've done with her.
Which, at this point, that would have been interesting, right? I mean, if you'd have given her a female character in a sci-fi, sword and sandal, flick.
82, 83, whatever.
It would have been, and like, this is marketed as Tigra in other countries. Like the poster for Fire and Ice has Tigra as the top, right? And yeah, I mean, like, yes, make this busty, near naked chick be a badass who takes on this guy that she's supposed to marry and who doesn't want to marry her. Make that guy way more overly gay than he's supposed to be. I mean, like, make the themes more intriguing for an 82 audience. Shock them, for God's sakes. I mean, like, why else have a cartoon? Otherwise, you're making, and I don't even want to disparage like The Last Unicorn or like Star Chaser.
Right,
I mean, like,
right.
you're making shitty cartoons. And like, Bakshi should know better by now at this point.
It's not even as horny as gummy bears.
Right. Those people bounce here and there
and everywhere.
They find adventure that's beyond compare.
They are the gummy bears.
They are the gummy bears.
Wow. All right. What else?
So I mean, like, this is such a forget. Like I said, if it wasn't for the poster of this movie, no one would know about this film. No one would know. No one would be intrigued enough to pull up and say, "Oh, Franzetta made a film," and then like actually watch it.
Yeah,
because it's just not. It's not worthwhile.
I think Janet Maslin in the Times called this a comic book movie for people who can't be troubled to turn the pages of comic books. Oh, and it helps if you're a horny 12-year-old boy.
Right.
I think it's
and that's the thing, right? Is that the horniness is just ramped up
such
to
busty,
like, oh, we were almost seeing a little bit of nip and
again,
and
like,
butt.
right, but yeah, and
Right.
that's that 12. You're like, oh my god, is that?
Right.
Can I pause it
here and see if
do you love how I act out some of the things that I like say, and like I know that no one can see me, but you can, and so I just paused like the VCR and like squinting to see what I can. It's disappointing.
It really was.
I mean, I didn't necessarily think I was going to like it, but I thought there'd be something. There was just nothing. There was nothing for me in this film.
And it really is like coming out of Bakshi's filmography. It really is like, you would think that he would have gone to bat for more things here. And I think maybe having Franzetta was the wrong move in this case. And I think had Bakshi been and I know they wanted to work together for a while and blah, 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 blah. But I think having Bakshi as the elder statesman in the room, they could have done something a little bit more different, a little differently. Not that he was like progressive or anything or subversive with Lord of the Rings, but I mean, like, with everything else that he's done, at least there's a chip on his shoulder, right? And there's a
fucking attitude in everything. There's a kind of fuck you in everything he's done, but not here.
Right.
There's just nothing here.
Yeah. It's
right? I mean, that's where, like, even if I don't like a lot of the films we've watched of his, at least there's something I can take away,
right,
or can sort of respect about his approach, right? But
yeah, nothing here.
Nothing here. This next film, Hey Good Lookin', I think there's a lot to talk about here.
Yeah.
And I mean, backstory, but then also like within the film itself.
Hey, good looking. Let's do something outrageous. See Brooklyn the way it was in the 50s, my man, as only Ralph Bakshi and his boys can do it. That's right. The same dude that gave you Fritz the Cat and Heavy Traffic is gonna give it to you once again in the wildest and craziest movie of your ever-loving life. Looking.
This is an outrageous, affectionate look at coming of age in Eisenhower era Brooklyn. Okay, no, that is like not what this film is at all. What the fuck, IMDb? But again, like, this is why I loved it.
Affectionate? Like, have you ever seen any Bakshi film be affectionate?
Right, because there is no, and that's something there's a lot that I don't understand about this story, right? One, yeah, this is not affectionate. So, like, what is this, right? I understand this is part of him, like, again, looking back on his growing up in Brooklyn and sort of, like, commenting on some of this. But we're not supposed to like Vinny.
No.
But at the same time, I can't help but wonder, like, what the fuck does Vinny want? Like, what? Well, because I don't think he really cares about being the leader of the Stompers, and I don't think the Stompers really care about him being the leader. I don't think these guys care about much. But like, so like, does he want to be a poet? Does he want to be an insurance salesman? Like, what does he want? Like, why is he there?
I think he. Well, it's hard to equate him to Travolta's character in Saturday Night Fever and even Grease to a certain extent.
Yeah.
But I think he's an indictment on this lost youth of the 50s, where it was like misplaced masculinity that coming out of the greatest generation, this baby boomer youth didn't know what to do with. And so this idea of like, we're pre-Vietnam, post World War II, and you've got this group of men, specifically this type of urban male who's expected to act a certain way, but then doesn't know how to really do anything with it. Right. And is like, he knows he's supposed to want to fuck a lot of girls and beat up a lot of dudes and drink and curse and dress cool and make a lot of money and be kind of a menace and be kind of that 50s man. But like, he has no idea how to do any of that.
Right. I mean, I think he likes dressing cool.
Right.
I mean, I love all the zippers. Yeah, that was really good. But yeah, other than that, I'm like, why are you? Okay, so you just expect it to be this way. But I really wanted to know, though, and this is why I don't know why Bakshi didn't do this. Like, give Vinny something else.
Right.
Give him a reason to sneak out of town like he does. I mean, give him something else to. Well, here's my chance now to go do this other thing.
I think that's the commentary, right? I think the commentary is that. And like, it's watered down a little bit because when it comes out, it's already a decade after the intent, right?
Right.
So, and we can go through the plot here in a second, but I think the idea is that these are all weird, sacred cows that Bakshi had latched onto, right? And so he's taken the piss out of white liberalism. He's taken the piss out of the mafia. And now this idea, you have to imagine that these were the guys who fucking fucked with Bakshi in his hometown, right?
Sure.
And so these are guys that are like a pseudo mafia related. They're tangentially related to the mafia, right? But they're also street toughs and like, he's seen them be glorified in things like West Side Story, and Grease was a Broadway play, or at least a play many moons
Right.
before the 78 release of the
Before
film.
the movie. Mhm.
And so, and Bakshi actually had the rights to make an animated Grease.
Oh.
And then he sold him. But so you had to figure that this romanticizing in the 70s of this 50s era aesthetic. You've got Happy Days that's right on the cusp of when he would have been making Hey Good Looking.
Mm-hmm.
And this idea of like Bakshi pushing all this back into our faces and saying, fuck you, you don't know anything. These guys were racist.
Right.
They were empty. All they gave a shit about was fucking and fighting. And even then, if they met somebody who was more important, this movie, like, what's disappointing to me about this movie is the way more interesting character is Crazy.
Right. Well, I was going to say, like, I get Crazy, right? I understand, sort of like what Crazy wants. And I think because of that, he is more interesting.
Right.
Right? Because you see him sort of do those things to get what he wants. And of course, at the end, it destroys him. Right. But again, like, that makes for an interesting character. Vinny doesn't seem destroyed to me because I never have any idea.
Right,
What
he's not deep
wants,
enough to be
right?
destroyed, right?
Well, but he does that. But that's not what I mean, right? Because I don't think Crazy's deep, right?
I think he's tortured.
No, right.
And I think he's way more. I think Crazy is the emotional center of this movie. I don't know if he's deep per se.
Because Vinny doesn't have to be deep for us to know that Vinny wants something else, right? I don't mean it doesn't have to be like big.
No, I think Vinny wants what society tells Vinny he should want. And I think that's why he goes and
but he never really tries to get it.
Right, because his most enjoyable times is when he's fucking around with Crazy.
Right.
Like when they're just shooting the shit and really broing out. I mean, their bromance is way more seductive than anything Vinny doesn't. Like, you're right. He doesn't want to be like, he's leader of the Stompers because he's probably the best looking guy around.
Right.
And the girls all kind of flock to him. He has girls because he's the best looking guy around. But there's nothing, and so he acts tough. But all really the toughness is the matter of how he dresses, right?
But we never see him so maybe this is what really bugs me there, because at the end when he like kind of sneaks out of town, it seems just to sort of save himself and not because of what happened to Crazy.
Oh, I think that's absolutely the reason why.
But we don't see that, do we? Does Vinny, the last time we see Vinny, does he look heartbroken?
No, but I don't think Vinny has the capability of being heartbroken.
But with Crazy, I think he would. Or I wanted him to.
I get you there.
Okay,
right.
That's what I'm saying, right? Because yes, I can extrapolate all this,
he should
but
be torn up by all of this.
Because that would then make sense. That would for me, it would earn that ending. Because I'm like, I don't know. Because it seems like all Vinny's doing is like just like saving his ass. But like, why? Like, where are you going, Vinny? You don't know anywhere else, right?
Right.
But at least if I'm like, oh, he's crushed because of Crazy, that makes sense. And that's interesting because you would think he'd be crushed because of Rozzy.
Right, but he doesn't give a shit about Rozzy.
That's what I'm saying, right? Yeah.
And I think Vinny cares more about himself and his image, obviously, than he does. But so I think Vinny is of the moment of getting out of town before people really realize that, and once the house of cards has come down upon him, that it's just a matter of, well, we got to go and get someplace else that they don't know me, and I can reenact this tough guy image 50 miles down the road when no one knows me. And that's why you see him, come back into town as in disguise, right? I mean, like, he's got the hat pulled over. He's not strutting around. Like you see that last moment where, he goes back, like he realizes all the shit's going down and the gunfire's happening and the fight's happening. And he starts to like reminisce about the day, right? I mean, reminisce when he was just like looking at himself in the cigarette machine. That's what he really wants, right? And that's when it was easy and he didn't have to, like, you see him when he's faced with any sort of trauma, but specifically that bumblebee that's outside the window.
Fuck, man.
But the dead body in the beach, right? Which is a weird sequence, but like, but he freaks out and runs, and that's what gets Crazy caught looking at the mafia wives.
Right.
So just to kind of lay out the plot here, we kind of talked around it, but like, we open up our scene with the trash can,
which was really interesting.
Yeah, like I said, like you said, even if you don't like these films, there's moments of just like clarity, and there's moments that where Bakshi really shines. And I think all of his beginnings to his films are really, really good.
Yeah.
Like they're just kind of gut punches. But there's this sequence where this trash can's talking to a pile of garbage. And then you get cut over to Vinny. You're in the future, and there's this kind of hooded figure who comes upon this girl and starts talking about the past, essentially, right? And then you cut back and you start to get into this kind of doo-wop, sha-na-na era of like, it really is. It's West Side Story, it's Grease, it's these guys that have all of this misplaced anger and
it's
youth.
the Lords of Flatbush.
Right. And so Vinny is the lead of the Stompers, and he hangs around with Crazy, who Crazy's dad's a cop, and Crazy's dad is kicked him out of the house and has tried to murder him at the beginning of the movie. And all Crazy wants is to one, support Vinny and be a part of the Stompers and find a place where he fits in, because he doesn't fit in anywhere. And so like he reacts violently when Vinny doesn't hold up those virtues. And then it kind of even betrays Vinny we get to the point, I jumped ahead, but we see Vinny kind of prepping himself, and it's very much Saturday Night Fever, where he's putting on a suit, he's zipping up, he's like has this awesome leather jacket that he's zipped up, and that's what started the story, right? Is they find this remnant of the leather jacket, and I'm going to tell you that story.
Well, yeah, he's got it, and he throws it to her,
right?
And he's like, smell it, remember? Right. It's weird, yeah.
So we see Vinny primping and like getting ready to go out, and he goes and meets with the Stompers, and then he hangs out with it. Once Crazy finds them, they basically just hang out together and do nothing, right? I mean, they're just
they go out on the town, they drink, and they
pick up a couple hookers, right?
Yeah.
And then they get drunk and they go and they fall asleep.
They crash on the beach.
Boardwalk.
Yeah.
And then from there, they wake up, and there's these women under the boardwalk kind of bathing, and Crazy walks. He can't help himself. He starts walking over and starts,
looking at boobs.
Right.
Yeah.
And it turns out they're all wives of mafia men. And so Vinny freaks out. He actually stumbles upon a dead body, and that causes him to panic. And he starts to run. And all the mafia men see Crazy looking at their wives, and they beat the shit out of Crazy, while Vinny is just hauling ass. Yeah. And he runs over into the Boogaloos, right? The
chaplains.
The chaplains, okay.
Boogaloo's the leader
of the chaplain.
Yeah.
So were they the black chaplains, or were they just the chaplains?
I think they were just the chaplains.
Okay, so
there's a black gang.
I'm equating that to the black chappies name in The Departed. That's what.
I
started like putting those together when I was watching it anyway. But so yes, he comes over across a black gang, and they basically say, you kind of stepped on our territory, and we're gonna prepare the Stompers to fight.
Yeah, now we got to rumble. Yeah,
and so Vinny doesn't want to.
He said, "You want to bring zip guns? We'll bring zip guns."
He's an awesome character.
Boogaloo?
Yeah,
no, he's great.
I think there was like one of them was Philip Michael Thomas again. So like,
yeah, because we get that great scene where they're like kind of, it's like a popping and locking scene. It's so good.
Yeah,
that was incredible. I mean, nothing was being done like that.
No, it was really cool.
Nobody was showing those guys doing that.
Right?
Yeah.
So Vinny doesn't want to, but he has to go back and convince the Stompers to fight. And the Stompers are like, "Fuck you, we're not fighting."
Well, you forgot about Crazy,
right?
Taking out all of those mafiosos.
True,
by himself, because because Vinny's there, he gets credit for that as well. Right. Oh, Vinny and Crazy did all this stuff, and we know, of course, Vinny didn't do anything, but Crazy doesn't care, and he's like, "Vinny, we're famous. Yeah.
And so they go back to the Stomp, and then when does Rozzy come into the play?
Rozzy comes in early, so when they're on the basketball court at the beginning, she's sort of like disguised and gets in a fight with Vinny, and then Vinny grabs Rozzy, who he thinks is like a boy or a guy, and grabs onto her boobs, and it's like, what's that? Right? Oh.
And the only reason that Vinny is really fighting with him because they think it's a kid. They think that somebody they can push around.
Yeah.
Vinny has no he's not brave at all. He finds somebody he thinks he can bully.
And that's it.
And it turns out Rozzy's had a crush on him the entire time, and she's kind of inserted herself into his life. they go back and they try to convince the Stompers to fight the chaplain. They want nothing to do with it. They're too busy drinking and fucking.
Drinking and yeah.
And Vinny can't believe it. Crazy corners him in the bathroom and is like puts a knife to his throat and says, "Man, you get out there and convince them." Essentially, right?
And they're all gone.
And so Vinny takes off, and Rozzy's like can't believe it. So her and like all the Stompers are going to a concert at the Arcadia.
Yeah. So they all go.
They all because Vinny like once Crazy has like really confronted him. Vinny's like, okay, fine, I'll do it. Yeah. And he burst in, and they're like, they've all left, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So then they got to go to the rock show too.
Right. So they go to the rock
Eva's
show.
making sandwiches and like in the bathtub.
Right. That poor girl. So it turns out there's a car chase between the Stompers, two of the Stompers on the way to the Arcadia, and some of the chaplains. And the chaplains basically wreck the Stompers into the Arcadia, and they kill the band. So now all the Stompers now want to do the fight, essentially. Right. And then Vinny still wants no part of it. Yeah. At this point, that's when Rozzy's like, "You're such a coward," and it's not at this point that she didn't.
So it was Boogaloo and then Sal, right? The big like Sal guy. They got like into the car chase and car wreck, and then
right.
So that's what led to the big fight. But then Rozzy, Vinny, Crazy, and Eva they've left the rock show, and they see like two chaplains or two guys, right, driving in the neighborhood, and they go to fuck with them, right? They're like, "Crazy, go get him. And so they run them off the road, basically, right? And then they jump out of the car, and Crazy kills them.
Right.
Just murders them. Yeah, and Vinny's like, "What the fuck are you doing?" Like, "Oh my God," right? That's when Vinny jets. And then Roz is like, "Hey, Crazy, who am I? Hey, Stompers, we're going to have to," like, and mocks him and mimics him.
Right.
Yeah. And then hooks up with Crazy.
Right.
Weird.
Yeah. And then Crazy's dad comes in, beats the shit out of him again. And then it all leads up to a big rumble with the chaplains. And like, even then Vinny doesn't want to fight.
Yeah.
Because Boogaloo's not there. And you see that's when you see when you see the chaplains start to lock and pop and dance and like fuck with the Stompers, who are all into it at this point because their friends have been hurt really badly.
Yeah.
The cops, Crazy's dad shows up. There turns out there's a shootout.
Yeah, I forget who started the shooting.
I'm not sure either. I can't remember now. And then so Crazy ends up getting killed, and Vinny pretends that he's shot.
Yeah,
and
because Crazy
away.
is on the roof, and this is what I didn't quite get, right? Crazy is on the roof, almost having like a psychotic breakdown.
Right.
Seeing things, and then Boogaloo like sneaks up on him, and I forget exactly what happens there. But Crazy's dad had like cornered Vinny and was like, "Okay, stay here." But Vinny kind of gets away. But when Crazy's dad turns to shoot Vinny, Crazy basically just like launches himself off the rooftop on top of his dad and like killing both of them.
Right.
And then Vinny fakes or pretends to be dead, and then he's gone.
And then comes back 30 years later and then Roxy's like, "You broke my heart," essentially. Like she's supposedly married now, or has a man, I guess.
But I felt like that was a ruse.
Just something she said.
Yeah, to see if he was going to get up and leave. Right. Yeah.
And then their rekindled romance 30 years later. And I guess, you can speak to how empty both of them were and how simplistic their lives always have been. So this story was made in 74, right? Or
74, 75.
Right.
Yeah.
And the only characters that were supposed to be animated were Crazy, Rozzy, Eva, and Vinny. And everyone else was supposed to be live action. And they filmed the entire fucking thing. It was a done deal. It was supposed to come out. And Paramount was like, no one's going to buy cartoons in real life characters.
Well, and they were sort of like, they were scared about the backlash from Coonskin. Right. So there was part of that, but then this other stuff.
And so they and Bakshi even knew, like, when he was like rendering it and like putting it all together, like his budget was going to blow up too. Putting it all together and getting those,
because didn't they had to like figure out a special way to do everything. Right? Didn't they have to kind of like retrofit some lenses to make it work. And
so then over the next 10 years, Bakshi spends the rest, his own money
that he got from fees, right? For like Lord of the Rings and other stuff. Yeah.
To rewrite it, to animate it. And it wasn't like he just took the film and rotoscoped it again. He redid it. So like what changed from 74 to 83 is I mean, weep for like, to be able to see that version of it, because I do think some of it gets watered down in a decade since. I do think that it hits harder if this is a piss take on that 50s machismo that existed or that was being romanticized at the time. In 80, it doesn't make sense because you've had, look, everyone's in love with Happy Days and the Fonz and Grease and Saturday Night Fever, even though it's misplaced love, right? Yeah. And so you do have things like Sha Na Na and Laverne and Shirley and like, you know what I'm saying? Like this idea and like, fuck, at that point, doo-wop Billy Joel, right? I mean, there's this resurgence of that we've fallen in love with this, like our 80s version of Make America Great Again kind of, right? I mean, so like this coming out and the message is, I would imagine, lost, right? I mean, like it doesn't, like no one's going to give a shit about taking down of a 1950s sacred cow at this point.
Right.
And I think it gets muddled a lot, and it's hard to like this, the sentiment of the racism and the like, you're not ready to start talking about mental illness at this point. You're not ready to start talking about the ills that you're not really ready. Like, I think the crazy character and being abused by his father and abused by his friends and misunderstood and
by everyone,
and manipulated by women, and trying to find his place in a Vinny world is a really compelling story. And I think that Bakshi does a really good job of portraying all of that in a heartbreaking, and I don't think I've seen really a character like Crazy in another movie. Like, I mean, like where it's been portrayed so tragically. Yeah. I mean, like maybe Cuckoo's Nest, I guess, but like even then it's still like he's the focal point.
Right.
And it's not, he just gets Cuckoo's Nest, he places himself there. Like it's not like, and it's more he can't get out of his own way.
Right. I mean, Crazy is a sidekick.
Right.
Also, right? And I think this is one of those rare instances where we see a sidekick who's more interesting and more fully developed.
Right.
Right. Than our main character. And so I think that's probably that reaction.
And
right?
I mean, like,
and who has like a better and more fully conceived arc as a character.
Right. I mean, yeah, he's nuts. I mean, like, and he's dangerous, but you have to imagine he was made to be that way. He's a redheaded, three-testicled nut bar, right? I mean, like, and that's a terrible way to phrase it, but I mean, from a 1950s terminology,
that's exactly what it was,
said, right? I mean, like, and they would have ignored him. Like, they beat him up and pushed him around because they fucking could.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what Bakshi does there with that character and making him so, so three-dimensional to be, not to be, to put it on the nose, right? But I mean, like to be so fully realized. I think that's what really to me stands out about this movie, because you're right. Everything else is kind of empty. And it's like, I don't really give a shit about like, okay, Bakshi, I get your sacred cows, but to be honest, that's a personal journey for you that I don't really give a shit about. Like I wasn't bullied by the Jets or the Sharks, so I don't fucking.
I didn't bring zip guns.
Right. So I mean, like maybe in 74 this makes more sense, and maybe your story is different. But like in 82, 83, I'm just like I like the animation style still, and I like what you're doing with some of the characters. But
yeah, because even though this came out in 82. The animation style is much more like Heavy Traffic, right? Or Coonskin. I mean, that kind of, like the cop in Coonskin is pretty similar to Crazy's dad.
Right.
I mean, that kind of drawing, that kind of depiction. So there really is, and older Vinny has that elongated kind of, jawline now that you don't see in Wizards and everything else.
And you had to believe if he redid everything that Vinny is fucking Travolta, right? I mean, he looks so much like Travolta. Like, I would love to see the I would love to see like stills or cells from it to see what he was originally. I'm assuming like if you look at the box art, he's not quite as stark as that kind of like puckered dimple, the butt chin kind of thing that that Travolta had so distinguishedly. So I mean, like, what do you think overall? Like, I mean, like,
overall, I think there's a lot of interesting things here, right? And I think that's one reason I get so frustrated with like the Vinny character of not knowing like, okay, what else does this guy like want? There's got to be, for me, there has to be something else for him, not just this life that he doesn't really care about. I mean, maybe he cares about the status, but even then, like, how far does that get him? Because his own gang doesn't really care. Like,
right.
What, I mean, so sure, some of the people like outside of the gang or in the neighborhood are like, oh, it's Vinny. But when he goes out, right? And he puts a suit on and he looks different. Right. And he's not that same kind of tough guy now. He's sort of like a womanizer, right? That's why I just like, what is that thing that really makes him leave town, right? And what's the story after that? Because you know what? I don't care what Vinny did between those times.
Right. No, of course not.
And I should.
Yeah.
I should once be like, oh, where did Vinny go? Well, because I don't think that he went and found like another sort of gang because he
didn't want that in the first place.
Yeah.
Anyway. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But that's where like, again, like with Crazy, we get it. Right. And that's why he's a more compelling character because we understand that like this is his life.
Right.
Right. All of it.
And you're absolutely right. If had he come back and they were both still broken up about Crazy and not able to get back together because of the guilt of what happened, like of you had to figure Crazy would have felt somewhat guilty in being with Rozzy and then and her knowing that and her kind of manipulating him and then Vinny letting Crazy build up his reputation and then letting him die for him without really any sort of, and then slinking off into shame essentially.
Yeah.
Had the piece of material not been a leather jacket,
but like Crazy's weird hat that he had on,
or part of his zoot suit or something. I think it would have been a better film.
Yeah, it's just because then at that point it's just not compelling. Where I feel like, okay, this is a different version of West Side Story, but it's still
right
that.
Well, and you can make it like
different songs,
right? Well, and that okay, so that's a good point, which we haven't brought up yet. But so by the time that they do this movie, they're not gritty 70s songs; they're 80s doo-wop songs.
Right.
So the songs completely undercut the tone of this movie as well. And so they're 80s versions of 50s songs essentially. Yeah, this movie needed to make you feel dirtier. This needed to be like, it needed to be closer to Heavy Traffic than
I wonder if the live action would have accomplished that.
I think so, yeah.
Did you see some of the people that he had planned to cast?
New York Dolls
as like a group of homosexuals.
Well, you had to figure they were the band that they were going to see at the Arcadia, right?
Yeah. And then Yaphet Kotto. See, that would have been like having those people in that film, right? Would have been, I think, much better.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But
I think it would have given like, because it makes sense, right? Because the four characters are really the main focus throughout the film to make the other stompers, because they're inconsequential, right? I mean, make the other stompers to be, to be real people that are, and it makes the point is driven home, right? Where Vinny is a cartoon in a real world setting, right? And was his whole
He's
entire,
just a caricature.
That was his whole entire point, right? Is that Vinny is nothing in this world. He's not regarded in any other sense other than in his head.
Right.
And he's easily erased, right? I mean, like, again, putting drawing terms on all of it. But,
well, because then it just, it becomes that
this reoccurring
clear metaphor, right? I mean, it's just, he paints a picture of this metaphor to go on with this.
This beautiful canvas that he's created. It just keep going back to the theme of this series, which is more belief and more money and more time. What he could truly have been. But,
have you noticed how often we've said that about the directors we cover
Right.
on this podcast?
Yeah.
But but look, I do feel a lot of times with Bakshi, the backstory becomes more interesting than the actual film. I think especially in this case.
Yeah, I think this is the one for me that falls the most short because of what could have been.
Yeah. Not being able to execute that vision, not
Right.
being and not having the backing, right, to execute the vision.
Right.
Yeah.
I do think that he, leans into some of his lesser tendencies in this movie too. Like I don't know if you need to have him. I don't know if you need to have Crazy have 3 testicles. I don't. That's not a point. I'm okay with Rozzy being busty. That's because it's fine. I don't have any problem with that. But like some of the silliness, and I don't know if you need the racism in this film, especially when you've redone it in '82.
Right.
Like
right.
I get that
right.
racism was a part of the time of the
Sure.
50s and that, but like where the chaplains are throwing around the N-word and talking about in beach and that, there's certain things like I don't know if that adds anything to the story, especially because they're saying it. And it's not like, what I'm saying? Like,
I'm with
like,
you. Yeah.
It's just like, it's not like, I know that they would have, I know that, but now you've made those points. And again, I get it. Not in 74, but you still did have.
No, but you have.
You haven't.
You have.
Yeah, true. Yeah, you've done.
Like,
this would have been after Coonskin, right? So
right. But he's done it every film.
Right.
So Fritz the Cat, Coonskin, Heavy Traffic, it's all there. And now we're just kind of like, okay, Ralph, you've done this before.
Well,
I get it, right? You've done this before. I don't need to see this again.
And then again, had it have been real live actors saying it, because again, he would have improvised the dialogue, right? Then at that point,
apparently you heard that. You heard the story. Did you read the story about that? Like at the beginning, where like he couldn't get the actors to sort of act naturally the way he wanted,
right?
And so like on a break, he just kind of snuck in and like filmed them,
right?
And then whoever he'd hired as director of photography quit when he told him.
Yes,
he was like, "Oh my god, look what I did!" And he's like, "I'm out of here."
Right.
Yeah. That kind of improvised dialogue, it would have been so much better.
Right.
But yeah, why bring that racism part in here? I don't.
Because Vinny's not deep enough to be. I mean, like Vinny, by just nature of being who he would have been in the 50s, would have been racist. But he would have been racist to everybody. It wouldn't have necessarily been a black Italian thing. He would have just seen everybody as other, right? It would, and I don't. I'm not arguing that makes it any better. I'm just saying that like there's no reason to call out black-white racism in this because he would have been that way with Jewish characters or or Polish or whomever else was in the borough with him, right? I mean, it would have been right, yeah. So Irish, whatever. I mean, like they just you can keep naming them. It's fine. That's who Vinny would have been racist to. But yeah,
you're saying Vinny's xenophobic, and
yes, yeah. because he's been programmed to become xenophobic. Yeah. But I do think I think Bakshi touches on these little moments that these moments where him and Crazy are just being silly dudes together that and like truly enjoying, like when Vinny forgets about the persona and can enjoy being with Crazy as Crazy's being crazy kind of thing. I think that I think those moments are so good, and I think Crazy's story and watching his evolution of a character is worth watching this movie just for those two things.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that this movie even needed a Rozzy.
No, I don't believe so either. I don't, because it doesn't.
And those women don't really do anything in this film. I mean, there's not a lot.
When it's a weird thing for Bakshi to take aim at, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like maybe you see, maybe it gives a reason for Vinny, for you to believe Vinny for a moment that he's a tough guy because he beats up on a little kid, kind of like for a moment. But having the story focused around, it just feels like it's a West Side Story.
That sort of like relationship thing that's not
right.
Yeah.
It feels like,
and like the dad who tries to keep her away from him, but then like never comes back at a certain point.
Right,
like,
right.
So
yeah, it just feels like that was a storyline that was a through line in these other films, in Grease and West Side Story, and like the main good looking dude's got to have a gal, and like she's got to be kind of brainless, and her dad's got to hate the
stomper lifestyle,
right? The do nothing
near
greaser,
yeah.
Who only wants to be in a gang and doesn't
want to do any gang work, right?
right.
I mean, doesn't want to do anything to earn his gang status. I don't know what
he's
it
really
takes
good
to
at.
be.
He's really good at zipping, though.
He is. That's a skill. It's a lost skill.
It's a
especially when you
scene,
have. It is. No, I really like it. I like it. I like the scene too where he's gonna cut out of town, but he keeps forgetting like to put clothes on.
Right.
So
Yeah.
He changes from his suit to the other jacket, but then forgets to put his pants on.
Right.
He has to come back. Yeah. I mean, I think I would have preferred this if it was just a buddy film, and then that would have, I think, raised the stakes for Vinny too, and given me something to, I don't know, believe in or latch on to with him. Because
are you surprised that no one's ever tried to do a live action remake of any of these?
I'm not because they are. I mean, I guess controversial.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess they don't feel controversial, but to see someone try to go do it again, I could see how they'd be like, I don't know.
It's not the right material for me.
Maybe not. Maybe there's a cat that wants to bone everything. I don't know if that's for me.
That's the next Disney live action remake.
Which one was, now one of these Robert Rodriguez was supposed to redo. Was it Fire and Ice?
Probably.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, that seems like the most boring one for Rodriguez to actually do.
Yeah. I think he had like, it was like in 2010. I think he was going to redo it. Yeah.
But that's the problem with Rodriguez's like low rent aesthetic. Like, what are you going to do? I mean, like, I guess you could tell it into like a grindhouse machete kind of way, but if you don't do anything with the story,
Danny Trejo would be Dark Wolf.
Yes, yeah, Hellcat. And then Selma Hayek. Okay, I'm talking myself into that.
Okay, yeah,
Antigua.
Yeah. Antonio Banderas could be the other guy,
right?
The like villager that like. And okay, see now I'm kind of on board with
Benedict
this too.
Cumberbatch can be the Ice King or whatever.
Yeah, Necron.
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, that's good. I like that. That's good. Okay.
All right. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Robert, make that movie.
Yeah, let's do that.
Stop working on.
It's been long enough.
Alita 2.
You were talking about in 2010, so just do it. Yeah, but other than that, no, I'm not. I mean, I think it would be interesting, but again, I think the ideas would have to then sort of take a different shape,
right,
to mesh with today. Right. Yeah. You're not going to have characters like Snowflake, right, in 2024. Right. Or not drawn that way is what I mean, and not drawn. You know what I mean, right? Not portrayed that way. And I think, for better or for worse, that's some of what gives Bakshi's films its like power and allure, is that he is not afraid to offend.
Right.
But I don't think people. Look,
I'm just thinking
the
about
whole like
rendered.
fucking woke like movement, right? Would never let Fritz actually in a bathtub with those.
I mean, we joke, but but like, I do also then wonder if, a clear lens on his work is actually doable. Like if on a grander scale than just this fucking bullshit podcast. It's like, what I'm saying? Like, it's just like, can you retrospectively look at this?
Someone else is talking about these films. Never mind.
Right. I haven't finished that episode of theirs, but
I haven't listened yet. So
it was.
We'll talk about it off mic.
Yeah. Right. But I mean, like, I don't know anybody that's calling for this, but is anybody frightened to actually take on and like really say what Bakshi's influence is because of the controversy that would surround even having to like justify any of it, right? I mean, just like, and hopefully there's an intelligent lens to look at it through. I mean, like, hopefully we could. I don't know.
Well, I think in some ways, to give us some credit, I think we are. Right. I mean, but I think this would be I think this work would be very hard to sort of do a retrospective on, because I wouldn't trust a larger audience to be able to have that kind of like clear, level-headed conversation.
Right.
That I think you would have to take. I mean, you would have to sort of remove yourself and like suspend disbelief, right?
Well, you could
and really sort of take this stuff in before reacting.
Right, which we don't do well.
No,
at all,
and that's what
we're immediately hit with the viscera, and then and then react.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, and I told you, I mean, and we've talked about it here, where Fritz the Cat was hard for me to get a handle on, right? Just because I couldn't quite get on the same wavelength. Now, I mean, once you do, it's like, okay, I get it, right? Okay, that's
right.
Yeah, but it takes, I think, some patience, because if you just kind of look at it a certain way, you're like, what the fuck are you talking about, asshole? You know what I mean?
Right.
So I think I think his work is tough.
Yeah, I agree. I just feel like it's so instrumental, and I feel like it's so like, I think it's, I think we kind of have lost a little bit of, I don't know what the term is, like historical, I don't know.
So I mean,
but like,
you mean like sort of recognizing the context within which something was made,
and then like, and also understanding the lens that it was supposed to be turning back onto the popular culture at the time.
Right.
I mean, this idea again, and I know I've said this before, but like this idea of like uncovering the veil of these, again, the sacred cows that he sought to bring down. But I mean, like uncovering the veil of the pretension and the what the caricatures that popular children's cartoons were using to portray racial stereotypes and to normalize racial stereotypes, and to throw that back into the face of an audience that weren't were either actively ignoring or didn't see. I think that type of thing is important. I mean, and I don't know if we do that now. I don't know if we do we. I mean, I don't know if there's opportunity. I'm sure there are, right? I mean, sure that there's, I mean, obviously, if you're doing, I mean, because we still talk about American Fiction and Bamboozled and all the other things, right? I mean, there's we're fed a certain thing.
Oh yeah.
And it's intended to keep our thinking aligned a certain way,
right? And not just with race, but with so many other things, right? I mean, class, status, socioeconomics, patriarchy, right? Not to, use the word that everyone uses these days. I mean, it's pretty trendy to bring up the patriarchy, but I mean, the way advertisements come to us, right? The way that these things are conveying ideas that if we don't step back and think about, we just sort of take at face value. Yeah. And I think that's what you're talking about with these films too, right? But yeah, we could just spring these movies on people. We could just gather. Hey kids, come watch cartoons.
This is, I guess, the lament, right, of the cinephile or whatever the fuck we are, is the inability to not, right? Is the inability to look at these things without this kind of, and goddamn, this sounds fucking pretentious. But with a critical lens on everything that we view, it's very difficult to, like, once you get into this mode, to like just kind of separate and enjoy something, especially there's something that's new that hasn't even seen before.
Right.
But the lament of like that no one turns it on. Even critics don't turn it on. And
no, because most critics are writing summaries.
Well, and also we don't,
no offense,
like we don't go back and talk about these films anymore. In small circles we do. But
we just move on.
Right. We just move on and talk Oppenheimer or Marvel or, I mean, and look, that's fine. I mean, we can talk about those things, but not to understand where we come from, and to, like I said, just paint yourself into very narrow lanes. It seems ridiculous to me.
But even then there's backlash. I mean, that's the thing, right? Is you can try to talk about like Marvel. So A.O. Scott, the New York Times critic, years ago, well, he wrote this book called Better Living Through Criticism, and the prologue to the book kind of recounts a tete-a-tete he had with Samuel L. Jackson over like the Avengers movie, right? Where he was sort of talking about like what is this movie telling us about like where we live. And if it's telling us something, I'm not sure I like what it's telling us, right?
Right.
And Samuel L. Jackson's like, fucking critics, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, look, man, that's why critics are here, right? Critics are like the biggest fans.
Right.
Right. And I think this is what people don't understand about critics, right? Is that they are the biggest fans and the ones who want to dig into stuff more than anyone else. Right? You don't have to like what they say, but it's not a personal attack on you.
Right.
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 I mean, these are guys and women, right, who are digging into this in a different way and who are looking at it through different lenses. And there's nothing wrong with that. Right? And if you want to go in and just like eat popcorn for 2 hours and sort of tune out, okay, do that. I mean, I don't want to do that. No, and like you were saying, I don't know how to do that. So, which makes me pretty like insufferable to live with, to be honest.
Yeah, no,
because then you just start doing it with everything, every single thing, right?
Yeah,
you're driving down the highway, you see a billboard, and you're like, and why did you use that word? Because that word means
right. Being us is no fun.
No, and like your partner's in the passenger seat, and she's like, "What the fuck are you talking about?"
What did I do? I did that. I did that recently. I don't even. I remember. Yeah, somebody used and I was like, "What are they thinking there? Like, why would you say that particular? Why would you use that particular phrase
right there? No,
right." And then my partner pulled the car off into a
get out
over a
get
bridge.
The fuck out.
And we both died.
But hey, you made it back to do this podcast.
And I walked away like the raping jackal that I am.
Oh my God. Ew. Why did you say that?
I don't know, because he walked out of fire. You know.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah. Well, he's like the devil. Why did they try to kill anyway? I do think one of the things that people can take away from what you've just said is think more deeply, right? Don't be afraid to dig into stuff and think about things critically and understand the context within which something was made. Look, I mean, I don't think we talk about context enough either, right? How something was made, why it was made, where it was made, when it was made, all that shit, right?
Right.
I mean, you know the thing about, fuck me, you know what Wittgenstein said, you know, the meaning of a word, the meaning of a word is its use, right? Meaning, you know, a word doesn't just exist in a vacuum, right? It has to have other stuff around it to really give it meaning, which is that same idea. Context, I don't know why I say this shit, but you understand. Oh yeah, we get it. You read a book. I mean, anything else you want to talk about today, Jason?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Moving forward, using all my breath. Never second best was it with you. You know, we're on the precipice of ending Bakshi, and I think we're going to end Bakshi kind of on a down note. I mean, generally, and we're obviously, I mean, I'm saying this out loud just because I think we both know we're not going to talk about his live action directional. I mean, because why the fuck would we?
No.
Look, there's nothing interesting about that, and that's a paycheck, and so like, why dig into it?
I mean, he was a director of animation on Halloween 3.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, sure. And he did the fucking Rolling Stones video and that HBO series. There's things we could look at, but
we're not going to.
Right. It should make next episode interesting, but no. I mean, it peters out. And I think this type of career, I think that was the only way for it to go.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I don't think that like you're not gonna. This makes sense to me that, you know, either ruffled feathers or just exhaustion, and, you know, Lenny Bruce wasn't going to be the guy that was headlining Carnegie Hall, right? I mean, he was always going to be the guy in the back room cursing into a mic and getting arrested, so someone else can walk in, right? And I think that's what Bakshi is here. And again, maybe I'm overinflating his historical context with Bruce, but I think if you asked animators today, maybe, or at least animators from the 80s, that, you know, absolutely, I think if you asked, you know, The Simpsons and Family Guy and Aeon Flux and everything on Liquid Television, and hell, even a lot of what was coming out of Japan after a certain while, that I think you'd have to point to Bakshi and say, you know what, that guy took everything he had to take, and the fact that he was able to make the content quality that he was is amazing. And had he been given any other sort of era or any sort of other resources, we'd be talking about him in bated breath, and we probably would still be allowing him to, make things.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I agree. Well, it's been an interesting journey that will soon end. So,
with Brad Pitt and Kim Basinger.
Yes. And Gabriel Byrne.
Yes, and Gabriel Byrne.
Don't forget about Gabriel Byrne.
Hollywood if she could.
That's so just, okay, so you have that to look forward to. Anything else we need to tell the people?
No, I'm good.
All right. Until next time, thank you all for listening.
And you know what to do. Keep screaming.
You have been listening to Why Does the Wilhelm Scream with your hosts, Brock and Jason. If you liked today's episode, do us a favor and rate, review, and subscribe in whatever application you use to consume podcasts these days. You can reach us by visiting whydoesthewilhelmscream.com. If you are in the DFW area, we would love to see you at a Fort Worth Film Club event. You can learn more about those and find a full schedule at fortworthfilmclub.com. And you can learn about my foundation and how we are trying to foster the next generation of film lovers at realhousefoundation.org. That's REEL housefoundation.org. Till next time.